Hey everybody, today we're debating whether or not Israel's Gaza war is justified, and we are starting right now with AP's opening statement. Apostate Prophet, thanks for being with us. The floor is all yours.
Um, Hello, everybody. Hi, James. Thank you so much for arranging this. Thank you, History Speaks, or Matt, for offering this debate. We finally get to speak on whether Israel's Gaza war is justified or not. And I defend the position that Israel's Gaza war, or better put, Israel's war against Hamas, is entirely justified. When I was preparing for this debate, I was preparing a great outline, a bunch of things to line up, a presentation. In the middle of it, I thought to myself, you know what? I'll just scratch all of this, put all of this down, and just expect from the other side, from Matt or History Speaks, to make his point in order to explain why this war is not justified. I could try as much as possible to sit here and try to justify this war and try to explain why it's okay, why Israel should fight. But here is the issue. Israel has been very much on the defense in terms of discussions, in terms of arguments, justifications, and even militarily very much on the defense. And to be honest, it seems to be very much a waste of time most of the time. So I am very much here today simply to hear the response or the attacks on Israel and the excuses, and to just deal with them a little bit instead of trying to apologize or trying to justify anything. There is one thing to point out, though. South Africa, a country that is an embarrassment in the world because of its terrible human rights violations, its high crime rates, and its living standards that are worse than the Palestinian territories, by the way, has made an attempt in public to take Israel to court on charges that that Israel is committing a genocide. South Africa also demanded that the International Court of Justice make a preliminary ruling and order Israel to take certain measures and to immediately call for a ceasefire. On January 26th, the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, published announced its first ruling, its preliminary ruling, to announce these provisional measures. And what the ICJ did there was to reject South Africa's demand to call for a ceasefire. So the ceasefire was not demanded, it was not announced. From here, you can tell something, which is that the ICJ implicitly recognizes Israel's right to defend itself according to Article 51 of the UN Charter, which says that every member has a right to self-defense. The ICJ, currently looking at all of the evidence, does not see a need to immediately call for a ceasefire. This was different, for example, in the case of Russia and Ukraine several years ago, where the ICJ explicitly called on Russia to stop its advances immediately. It did not do the same thing with Israel, but somehow this is seen as a victory by the pro-Palestinian side, which is very strange. So a ceasefire has not been demanded. So far, the ICJ only said that that it is plausible that some of the violations claimed by South Africa or some of the concerns raised may be occurring. This, in legal terms, basically means it is possible that whatever South Africa is alleging is happening, although the ICJ makes no remark on the strength or validity or on the strength of these claims. So this is the situation that we are in. The only court, the highest court in the world at the moment that has said something about this war, has not deemed it necessary to call for a ceasefire, and has also rejected to throw this case out, but has just said it is possible that Israel might be doing something wrong, but it's also it's also possible that Israel is not doing anything wrong, and then also called on Israel to take certain preventive measures, such as telling people or government officials not to incite violence, not to incite genocide, to prevent genocide, to protect the Palestinian population or the population of Gaza from genocide, mass extinction, whatever you want to call it. That's it. That's where we are. Right now, Israel is waging a war against Hamas, a war that is absolutely necessary after we have seen the horrible scenes of October 7th. Israel is, as it is recognized in the UN Charter, defending itself against a threat, that has been there at the border for 20 years now. Almost 20 years, and that has done nothing except fight, and inflict terror. When we speak of Israel defending itself, I think it should be laid out what exactly it means when Israel says we are defending ourselves. Hamas has engaged in significant rocket barrages over the 2 decades, significantly in 2008, 2012, 2014, 2019, and 2021. These are significant escalations where Hamas conducted great missile barrages on the civilian population of Israel. But this is not all. Throughout every single year since Hamas rose to power in 2006, 2007, Hamas has been firing rockets on Israel. It's very, very interesting. Not funny. When you go to Israel, you will see that Israelis have an app that is essential on everyone's phone. It's called Red Alert. And it gives them a direct push notification, an alert to seek shelter because missiles are coming. This is an average Israeli's everyday life. An average Israeli or every Israeli has an app that tells them missiles coming, look out, seek shelter. Israel developed a system of defense called the Iron Dome just to deal with the fact that on the Gaza border, on the other side, there is a terrorist organization that relentlessly fires missiles at Israel. And why exactly are they doing that? Are they doing that because they are being oppressed by Israel? Are they doing that because they simply have no other chance? No. You will often see Palestinians themselves or Gazans themselves say that Gaza was a wonderful place before the war. It could have been a much better place. Hamas came to power after Israel disengaged from Gaza in 2005. In 2005, it was a popular move in Israel to disengage from Gaza, to remove Israel from Gaza entirely, and to even remove all the Israeli Jewish settlements from Gaza. And one of the arguments used was that that this will make us more secure, it will reduce the hate and friction and violence and so on, and it will give the other side the chance to demonstrate autonomy and work toward independence. In fact, in 2009, Benjamin Netanyahu, the guy who is vilified to no end today, is the one who gave a speech in 2009 at the Bar Ilan University where he appealed to Israelis in general and said Israelis should make peace with the idea that there may be a neighboring Arab state, a Palestinian state, and this was applauded. And he said he calls upon the Israeli people and the Israeli politicians to acknowledge and to work towards such a peaceful solution under the condition that the Palestinian side, or Gaza, vows to have peace and not resort to violence. And unfortunately, this requires a demilitarization of such a future state. In 2005, the argument was that when Israel leaves Gaza, things will get better. There will be more security. And if there is no security, if Gaza turns into a hotspot for terrorism and Gaza attacks Israel, then of course Israel would reverse this disengagement and would go in and take Gaza and end this project. They didn't do that. They adopted a method of appeasing the terrorists that rule over Gaza. In Gaza, Hamas was elected as the popular government Hamas rose to power, went to a civil war and kicked out the opposing, the opposing Palestinian parties, took power solely for itself, and started oppressing its own population, including with torture, which is something that is documented very, very much by people like Mossab Hassan Youssef, who is the son and the son of Hamas, of a Hamas co-founder and also a former Hamas member. And Hamas has said from the very beginning in 2006, made very clear in 2007 that they have no intention at all of recognizing Israel, of recognizing the peace process, of making peace with Israel, and of giving up the violent fight. They made it very clear that they will keep fighting no matter what, and they will not agree to disavow terrorism. Since then, Israel and Hamas have been constantly fighting. They have been fighting this entire time. Israel had a blockade in place that would be lifted if Gaza became prosperous and showed signs of peace. Of course, Gaza didn't do this. Hamas did the opposite. So Israel tightens the blockade. The blockade was still, over time, slowly eased as time passed. Hamas never responded nicely to this, but responded with violence every single time. Eventually, this led to a full blockade of Hamas by Israel, which was also supported by Egypt, by the way. However, now it seems that those people who are against Israel and who criticize Israel of being the oppressor claim that the Palestinians or the Gazans are fighting back because of the blockade, not realizing that the blockade is only in place because the Gazan Authority, Hamas, will not agree to make peace. This is why Israel is fighting. This is why Israel is defending itself against this enemy. If the enemy stopped, if Hamas stopped and said, we will work toward peace and we will also agree to recognize Israel, things would go differently. There would be no excuses left. However, Hamas is fighting and vows to fight forever. In fact, on October 24, just a few weeks after October 7, the designated Hamas speaker, Ghazi Hamad, made a statement that he made in an interview on Lebanese TV, where he explicitly said that October 7 is not the first nor the last. There will be October 7, 8, 9, 10, October million. We will do this over and over and over and over again. We will continue this fight, and we have the means to continue for years until Israel is completely destroyed, because this state has no right to exist. That is the stance of Hamas. What exactly do you expect Israel to do in response to that? In 2018, Fatih Hamad said that a speaker of Hamas, also in charge of Al-Aqsa TV, which is the Gazan or Hamas state TV, said that their aim is to eventually cleanse Palestine of the filth of the Jews, upon which they want to then establish a caliphate. This is something he said in 2018, and he said we will do this in 4 years. Obviously, that didn't work out well for them, but these are some of the speakers. Let's not even get to the charter. I'm sure we can go into that very much. There is so much to say, such as that Hamas is hiding under the civilian population. Hamas is using actual humans as human shields, and so on. But I will just leave it at that and say, so far, Israel's war is entirely justified. I see no reason why it shouldn't be. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that opening, Apostate Prophet. And want to let you know, folks, if it's your first time here at Modern Day Debate, I'm your host, James. We are a neutral platform hosting debates. Oh, not yet, History Speaks. We're a neutral platform. Let me just sharing debates on all sorts of topics. We hope you feel welcome, whether you be pro-Palestine, pro-Israel. We're glad that you're here. Hit that subscribe button, as we have many more debates coming up. And with that, we're going to kick it over to History Speaks for his opening statement as well. Thanks for being with us. History Speaks. The floor is all yours.
All right. Thank you for doing this, Ridvan and Modern Day Debates. We'll get right to it. Can you guys see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's see. How do I click play? Okay, I'm just going to pause share for a second and then launch this thing. All right. Now I will share again. Okay, we can see now. All right, whatever. Whatever. It's not working the presentation, but that's okay. We'll just show it here. Okay, so this war is atrocity. It's completely unjustified, and there are two core reasons for it. Israel is first indiscriminately killing civilians, raising Gaza, and committing war crimes. One atrocity can't justify another. This is barbaric morality and a betrayal of Western values and the rule of law. The second reason it's unjustified is the goal is going to fail. Israel's not going to destroy Hamas. If we have time later, and I think we will, I'll also get into a side issue that's still relevant. What would be an alternative solution to the terrorism issue Israel faces? And that, namely, would be addressing the Palestinian concern of 75 years of an indigenous people having been colonized, having had their land stolen, having been ethnically cleansed, having been occupied continuously since then. If you count the Arab Israelis who were occupied for a period, torture chambers, periodic massacres, and so on. Okay. All right. So in the first place, it's important to emphasize the level of destruction in this massacre currently occurring in Israel, in Gaza. So in early January, the World Bank, this is 2 months ago, 3 months into the war, in early January, 99,601 out of 218,000 roughly residential structures in Gaza were totally annihilated, were uninhabitable. So 45% after 3 months of the so-called war of all houses were annihilated in Gaza, according to the World Bank. That shows that we're not having any kind of discrimination, any attempt to limit damage. We're raising the strip. An AP article from January 11th, 2014 noted, interviewing many military experts, historians, this is one of the deadliest, most destructive campaigns in recent history. The level of destruction is more extensive if you control for time than al-Assad's raising of Aleppo, Ukraine, and Mariupol, and moreover, many of the Allied bombing campaigns in the Second World War. In fact, I cannot find any case of any war, if you look at the civilian casualties, for example, in the 2020s, the 2010s, the 2000s, and 1990s, other than recognized genocides like Rwanda, the Second Congolese War, Milosevic, where people are killing civilians this fast, right? At least 20,000 deaths, probably far more. 4,000 a month. That's not common at all. It's in fact extremely bloody in the contemporary era, and Ridvan is, of course, defending it. Other issue is that nearly half of the bombs being dropped on Gaza are imprecise dumb bombs. This is not precedent for Western militaries in recent times. Isn't even what the Saudis did in Yemen, for example. These bombs have has a much greater range of damage, and it's much more difficult. One needs to engage in special technical measures. There's no evidence Israel's engaging in to limit the scope of civilian casualties if one is using dumb bombs at this extraordinary rate. As I say, in terms of civilians killed, the figure, our government, the U.S. government, believes the Hamas Ministry of Health figures are accurate. If you look at the women and children killed, and you assume that very few of the women and children or really none, basically, or very few of the teenagers are fighting in Hamas, then you're already going to get 21,000, 22,000. That's it's extraordinary for 5 months of war. Again, faster pace than al-Assad in Syria. So that's the type of efforts that Israel's defenders are defending. Now, let's talk about the intention of the war. So is it really the case Israel's reluctantly killing civilians that are just being used as human shields, and it's so terrible and they hate it, but they can't? But no, I mean, they've expressed murderous intention and contempt and dehumanization for the Gazan population. So this guy, Hassan, who's the head of Allian, he's Druze, I guess. He's the head of the coordinator for the government of the occupied territory, so he has a big role with Palestinians. He said, Hamas became ISIS and the citizens of Gaza are celebrating. Human beasts, I'm talking about the citizens, are dealt with accordingly. Israel's imposed a total blockade on Gaza, no electricity, no water, just damage. Giori Eiland, one of the most prominent military elites in Israel, former IDF operations chief, said Israel has no choice but to render Gaza into a place that's temporarily or permanently unfit for living. Every building will be considered a military target no matter what. This is a foreign minister of Israel, Mr. Katz, who said all the civilian population in Gaza is ordered to leave immediately. They will not receive a drop of water or a single battery until they leave the world. Again, Ridvan, you should be very proud that this is the people you're lining up with. And then this gentleman, Vatouri, the deputy speaker of the Knesset, we are too humane. Burn Gaza now. And he also said the people of Gaza cannot be described as animals because animals are too good. And that's even leaving aside this guy, one of the cabinet ministers that talked about nuking Gaza. Okay, so let's talk about now specific war crimes. We talked about how we have a historic level of killing of civilians and we have a historic level of raising infrastructure. So let's talk about specific war crimes. The three specific ones I'll allege are occurring in Gaza systematically are violations of the principle of discrimination. I'm not going to bore you guys with the legal semantics. We can go here if you want. And the violation of proportionality and also collective punishment of the civilian population. So first, with discrimination, it appears if from testimony of soldiers that that war zones have been turned into what are called free fire zones. This is one of the most hideous war crimes America committed in the Vietnam War, where you evacuate an area, you say this is going to be a war zone, and then you just shoot people or don't take any precautions if they fail to evacuate. So this is from an article in The Guardian, 8 February 2024, where some of the soldiers they interviewed said they considered any civilian who remained in the combat zone after being warned to leave as complicit. And just to quote them, one of them, what am I going to think? They're not supporters of Hamas. What are they doing there then? We should all ship them to Yemen if the Houthis like them so much. So you're not only seeing dehumanization, but a policy that they're complicit, they can be shot at if they're still in the war zone after being evacuated. In terms of discrimination, you also have very serious allegations of deliberately killing civilians at some level. I'm not saying they're trying to kill every civilian they encountered, but there are cases where it appears IDF is deliberately killing civilians. One of these cases is Mr. Abdullah. I can't remember his first name, but he was a Lebanese journalist for Reuters. He and other journalists were shot at. Investigation by Reporters Without Borders found that it is very unlikely that they could have been mistaken for combatants, that they were just shot at, even though they were clearly journalists and the Israelis were in a position to know. I believe there's another investigation right now that's been released and came to the similar conclusion, though I don't want to say who it was because it was some kind of mainstream organization. Just like yesterday, and I forgot to read about it. Okay. Yeah, this is another one. This is just quoting the Reporters Without Borders thing. And you also have these white flag shootings, which illustrate this kind of free fire zone policy, indiscriminate killing of civilians. You have all these strange episodes of white flag shootings. CNN was just in Gaza to interview some Palestinians, and what do you know? A bunch of men are shot at who are waving white flags. Also, an older lady was shot at. And of course, we know about the 3 Israeli hostages who were shot and killed while waving white flags, shirtless and unarmed. So that tells you something about Israel's rules of engagement, the most moral army in the world. And this is CNN guy. I mean, what are the chances? CNN just goes in to interview people briefly in Gaza, and they just massacre these people. So that's lovely, Israel. Proportionality is another war crime. So proportionality, without getting into the semantics so much, it's not like proportionality is basically you have to ensure that when you're going after achieving military aims, you're not killing civilians out of proportion to the military aims. So you can't kill one guy, one enemy combatant if you know you're going to kill 1,000 civilians. Doesn't mean you can't kill civilians. That's war, but proportionality is relevant. So in terms of proportionality, again, the testimony from Israeli soldiers is extremely damning. The emphasis is on quantity, not on quality, a former intelligence officer told 972 magazine. And point of fact, we're seeing that proportionality estimates aren't even being made. This is all being outsourced to AI by Israel, according to the same source, 972. And all of that, because all the Hamas members are marked for death, they are willing to kill all of them. Even if even if it's a trivial person, didn't participate in October 7th, doesn't have any relevance really, isn't even actively in arms, they want to kill all of them. So they're willing to bomb the houses that Hamas people are in, and this is all cleared by Israel according to the 972 investigation. If you can kill Hamas, it doesn't matter how low the level is, and even if it'll entail collateral damage, you can bomb the home and kill the family and the kids. As this quote shows. So here's a picture of the premature babies at El Shifa Hospital, and this is another example of proportionality issue. I accept Israel could have lawfully entered the hospital because Hamas was at some extremely limited level. The command center thing was utter lies, using it for military purposes. But you can't bomb the hospital. That's obviously a violation of proportionality, just to protect your soldiers, your brave idea of soldiers, and reduce the risk slightly. You cannot bomb a hospital and destroy the solar panels. They bombed it. They killed premature babies. They killed patients. That is obviously a war crime and a violation of the principle of proportionality, particularly because the military advantage of doing that was very trivial, given the very small presence of Hamas in that place. Okay, also, third war crime, collective punishment. So Israel has a specific doctrine of collective punishment in its military. So this is not just me inferring something from what Israel is doing in the current war. It's called the Dahia Doctrine, and just to quote again Giori Eiland, who was formerly the head of the National Security Council in Israel, so one of the top military elites there. He talked about the use of this in the context of the 2006 war with Hezbollah. He said it's about the elimination of the Lebanese military, the destruction of the national infrastructure, and intense suffering among the population. So the goal is, according to this former head of Israeli National Security Council, is to inflict suffering on the civilian population. And that is a doctrine that is in place and has been decided upon. This is a plan, has been approved. So it's not just Lebanon war, but is now. Okay. So that relates to all the destruction of infrastructure we're seeing. They're raising the strip as part of this notion of you punish the civilian population. And we also saw this in Cast Lead and Protective Edges. We can talk about the previous two major massacres in Gaza. Also, starvation is being used as a weapon of war in Gaza, which is collective punishment. You have to remember, the Israelis initially didn't want to let any food into Gaza. They said, no food, no fuel, everything is closed. We're fighting human animals, what the defense secretary said. Now, Ridvan will say, hey, they are letting them in. Well, 2 points in that regard. First, they're doing the best they can to find all kinds of bullshit excuses to not let it in. And second, they didn't want to let it in. We pressured them. We made them. We conditioned our weapons on it. Gallant said the reason he let it in, as I show here, Guardian article, is the Americans insisted we're not in a place to refuse them. We rely on them on planes for military equipment. What are we supposed to do? Tell them no? Yeah, so they're trying to starve this population into, they're throwing Hamas or return the hostages or whatever. Human Rights Watch has documented the statements of intent. Even President Biden alluded to it in the State of the Union, how you can't use hunger as a negotiating chip, right? As a bargaining chip. Biden wouldn't have brought that up if there wasn't evidence or fear that Israel was doing it. And then finally, you have reports of small-scale massacres and the large massacre. We, of course, had the Flower Massacre, which we all heard about, where the eyewitnesses claim Israel shot upon these starving people and caused a stampede. Israel has another story. There's also another allegation of a massacre that Al Jazeera reported on based on testimonial evidence, where men from a family were separated from women. An extended family, 19 men were all killed, and the women were apparently strip searched and beaten. So Israel, of course, Israel's entitled to defend himself from these allegations. Thought war is real, but nevertheless, we have an overall picture of systematic war crimes, collective punishment, violation of the principle of proportionality, indiscriminate bombing, and attempting to punish the civilian population. And it's outrageous. Anyone with liberal principles would be defending this criminal state. Okay, the second, and much briefer, don't worry, this will be like 30 seconds or 45 seconds because we don't have time, obviously. Reason to oppose this massacre is that Israel's goals are unachievable. Israel's not going to destroy Hamas. U.S. intelligence says they're not going to. Israeli intelligence says they're not going to. By setting this maximalist goal up, Israel is actually guaranteed a propaganda victory for Hamas because they're going to survive. Had Israel done something like, say, we're going to go in and conquer part of northern Gaza and carve out a buffer zone in the Strip to prevent, they could have prevented any October 7th from ever happening. And they wouldn't have killed nearly this many civilians and raised so much infrastructure. But instead, they decided to kill tens of thousands of people, maim and orphan far more. Children are the number of children that have been killed, I think, is higher than all children who've died in wars combined in the last 3 previous years, something like that. But no, instead they've set unattainable goals which they're going to fail to achieve, and the fools on social media are cheering on these unattainable goals. But U.S. intelligence Israeli intelligence. Also, the fact they haven't uncovered enough infrastructure and tunnels, namely, or killed enough people to achieve a liquidation, which is very difficult. They might, it's a technical term, render Hamas combat ineffective, but they're not going to destroy them because they haven't uncovered enough infrastructure or killed enough fighters. In fact, they're withdrawing from them. Okay, all right.
Matt, just a very quick thing.
Shoot, I was on mute the entire time. Sorry about that. Okay, really quick. Folks, our guests are linked in the description. So check out AP and History Speaks links. Want you to check out theirs. Even if you don't agree, there's value in checking out the links of people you disagree with so you can understand them more. So AP and History Speaks are linked in the description below. That includes at the podcast if you're listening via the podcast later on. With that, jumping into the open dialogue, gentlemen, the floor is all yours.
Yeah, so one thing to quickly point out here is that the debate topic is whether Israel's war on Gaza or against Hamas is justified or not. However, Matt didn't spend a minute or so discussing whether it is justified or not, but rather spent the entire time discussing whether Israel's methods during this war are justified or not. I guess there seems to be a misunderstanding on his part, or maybe he should have made it clear that this is actually what he's intending to debate. I don't understand, Matt. What is this about?
Yeah, if you look at like classical philosophy of just war theory, there's two elements. It's a just cause, and there's a just practice of the war. The war exists as it exists. Israel has adopted this policy of killing, of destroying Hamas, of liquidating, of basically raising the strip. We can defend some fantasy scenario where they did something different, but we have to defend or reject what they're doing now. That's my view. And that's consistent even if we want to get pedantic with like traditional just war theory. You have to look at the conduct as well. I don't think even I probably propose what would have been a sane policy, but I don't think any of this is productive or going to solve the problems. The problems is that the Palestinians hate the Israelis and support terrorism against them, and that's because they stole their land and ethnically cleansed them.
So just to clarify, when it comes to the declaration of war in 2023, just a few months ago, after October 7, Israel officially declared war on Hamas. Do you have any objection to that, or do you think Israel's decision to go to war is justified?
The problem I have is that it's a bit of a complicated situation because Hamas committed a terrible atrocity, which I don't. One party commits an atrocity doesn't make Israel's overall situation of turning Gaza into an internment camp, of illegal occupation, of its own systematic war crimes with the settlement expansion, colonization. No, I don't think that's. I think some kind of police action would have been justified, but I don't believe war would have been justified. If you do believe war would have been justified, the model I sketched of conquering buffer zones and trying to engaging in targeted assassinations of Hamas leaders would be a sane one. We have to talk about the war in the real world, not the war we wish Israel was waging.
So you think Israel shouldn't have declared war on
No, but if they're going to, if they were
October 7,
in the real world, they were going to. In the real world, they were going to.
Okay, but what do you think Israel should have done instead of declaring war?
Okay, I think that Israel needs to recognize that the problem it has with these people is that it stole their land.
Okay, that's not my question. I asked you, what do you think Israel should have done?
I'm going to answer the full question. I think that Israel needs to address the root causes of Palestinian support for terrorism against them, which is continual colonization, land theft on sham pretexts, torture chambers.
That's pretty much bullshit.
Okay, it's bullshit that they stole the land. Is that your claim?
You're not answering the question.
No, I wouldn't have declared war. But
Okay, that's not my question.
They
What should they
should
have done
have
instead?
they should have lifted the blockade, and after if the blockade were lifted, I'm not saying they should have. I'm not saying they should let the people come in. They should have lifted the blockade. They should have fortified their border. The fact that October 7th happened was a massive fluke. Was a massive fluke. The idea that this happened, there were far more soldiers stationed in the West Bank than in Gaza. They should have fortified their border. There's the chance of this recurring was nearly zero. Like these people have no air force.
All right.
They have
So
nothing.
your suggestion is
No,
that
I've given all.
Hamas
I've given all.
on the other side, and Hamas rises up and says this is the final uprising. We will finish Israel forever, and they made it clear that they want to eradicate.
If they
Israel
lift
forever.
the blockade,
and your suggestion in response to that is Israel should lift the blockade.
Israel should lift the blockade and its policies of colonization. And if Hamas at that point and move toward a two-state settlement, and which Netanyahu has said he's been blocking for 20 years, if Hamas at that point was still engaging in violence against Israel, when, by the way, in their 2018 or 2017, one of those 2 years, updated manifesto, they said Hamas considers the establishment of a fully sovereign, independent Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital and on the 67 borders, with return of the refugees, to be a formula of national consensus. So
read the full.
Yeah, they don't accept they don't accept anything other than theoretically, as a matter of principle, they don't accept Israel, but they do accept, as a matter of realpolitik, the two-state solution. Right? They don't. In principle, they'd love to have a Palestine from the river to the sea. That's what they believe, right? But
can you read the full? The entire.
This is 2018
in the charter.
Yeah, they say Hamas believes that no part.
Which article is that?
They say Hamas believes no part of the land of Palestine shall be compromised or conceded. Blah blah blah. However, without compromising its rejection of the Zionist entity and without relinquishing Palestinian rights. No, exactly. They're basically saying they want. Of course, they want the whole territory. Like obviously, they do.
Yes, exactly. So why in the world would Israel accept Hamas's supposedly public shenanigans and alterations of its goals when the article clearly says, we would be okay for a temporary two-state solution, although we want to eventually destroy Israel altogether and take all of it.
Politics involves engaging in the real world, and Hamas understands this to the extent that they recognize that a two-state solution is the international model. It is a national model.
And yet in the very same article they say they still hold
they don't believe
maintain that they want all of the land.
People want many things. Netanyahu, I'm sure, would love to annex the West Bank. He can't do that right now because he has certain constraints. Israel wanted to starve to death all of these people in Gaza. They didn't want to let in any humanitarian aid. I showed that in my presentation. They couldn't do that because the U.S. said we won't give you weapons if you don't. So people have to act within the real world. Hamas has extreme constraints because they're pathetically weak. The fact that Israel let this happen is an absurdity. So no, it's overreacting like 9/11.
Right,
no. So I told you that if you want to go to war, there is a way to do that that is not criminal or ridiculously stupid, which is to conquer buffer zones, engage in targeted assassinations. There is no
evidence that there is a criminal thing going on at the moment, which is why the ICJ even themselves said there is plausibility, but there is no reason to.
So that's for genocide. Did they say that? That's for literal genocide. Okay, so they say it's plausible genocide's occurring.
Okay.
There are many. You're totally speculating as to why they didn't call for a ceasefire. There are many reasons why they why they might not have done that. I think the most likely situation is that they're up against the most powerful nation in the world, the United States, just against them, and they know Israel's likely to disobey, and it'll just ruin their authority in Western nations because the United States will.
They also knew that
Russia's trivial compared to the United States.
Was going to disobey, and they still did it.
Of course, these institutions act within the real world.
They didn't throw it out. Yeah, they didn't throw it out. They still said that there was
possibility of genocide,
and yet plausibility, not possibility, and yet they didn't.
Injunctive relief. The only claim that has been found in merits is that this is a plausibly genocidal war. The injunctive relief is purely your speculation as to why they didn't do it. There's no evidence, zero. You can't provide a shred of evidence other than your speculation, clairvoyance, that they didn't call for a ceasefire because they think it's plausibly genocide, but probably not. And in any case,
well, it is very clear that they didn't call for a ceasefire, despite that being the explicit demand from South Africa with the claim that there is obviously a genocide, obviously massive war crimes, which is why the ICJ, based on this and this and this ruling, should call for a ceasefire, and the ICJ said no. We're not doing that.
Israel would not have complied with the
fact,
ICJ decision. The United States would have backed Israel up. There's many pragmatic
and now you're
reasons.
speculating as well. So you're saying I'm speculating as to why they.
Yeah, your whole argument is speculation. The only thing we have from the ICJ is that,
okay,
Israel wouldn't have complied anyway. They wouldn't have stopped the war. So
that's a good speculation, but it's still just a speculation. Just yeah. Okay, mine is also obvious.
I don't think the viewers will say that. So, what specific war crime that I listed? I talked about proportionality. The Guardian interviewed many soldiers who said that they are treating evacuated areas as essentially free fire zones. That they view the civilians who stayed there as complicit and shoot first, ask questions later. Is that made up? Doesn't bother you? Think that's ethical? What?
You brought up many of the things that certain people said, that Knesset members.
I brought up
one of the things
on the ground too.
Was a Knesset member who was that you brought up?
But what about I'm talking about the soldiers specifically.
The guy is not even in charge of the war. He doesn't decide.
Yeah, but if you're having government,
you bring him up as an example of somebody.
The foreign minister, I'd say, has authority, and he talked about how they're not going to get any water until they leave the world. So you got a little issue there.
Okay, yeah. So let's establish this then. So your claim is that Israel is indiscriminately killing Palestinians.
In terms of how that's defined the law of war. Yeah.
Yet on the other hand, you are from the beginning here also presenting to us the evidence, and I can. It goes much further than that Israel has been calling on Gazans to evacuate and has been providing safe corridors, has been saying long before they started the systematic invasion and attack that they should evacuate south because it's a safer zone, which is why North Gaza was considered and still is considered a war zone, whereas the southern part or the safe corridor are considered relatively safe. And Hamas, in response to that, told its population, no, stay where you are, don't go anywhere. Is that a fact? Yes or no?
I mean, there was like three questions contained in there. Regardless of whether Israel is committing genocide, which has been said to be plausible, or maybe it's not committing genocide, maybe it's merely engaging in this free fire zone policy where it wants them to evacuate, but if they haven't evacuated, they'll just kill them anyway. If they haven't, we've given them a chance. They're enemies. Those are both war crimes.
Israel.
Those are horrible atrocities. The United States didn't have a policy in Vietnam of killing civilians. Nevertheless, the free fire zones policy is one of the biggest disgraces that our military acknowledges occurred, where they basically said no. And Israel is apparently engaged in a policy like that, according to testimony 11. And you're fine with that because, they gave them a chance to evacuate. So if you're an old grandmother or you couldn't evacuate for whatever reason, or you didn't want to, you just can be killed because you're presumed to be an enemy. That's apparently what you're defending.
Okay, so Israel did tell the population in advance, long before the invasion, to evacuate south, right?
Yeah. Yes. But you think it's okay? No, I'm going to ask you a question now. Do you think it's okay? So let's say they say evacuate and they're doing it in good faith. Let's assume that. You think it's okay then to just shoot at civilians who've stayed there?
No, I don't think it's okay, and I also don't think that this is.
You think the testimonial evidence is fake that the Guardian?
And that this is what the IDF is doing. What the IDF is doing is to treat the zone that they called for an evacuation from as a war zone, which is why it is significantly more likely that a civilian remaining there would be shot or would be harmed or would
They're
be
saying
killed.
they are guilty. We see that multiple people we see them as guilty, complicitous. They're treating these people as if they're Hamas. And you also, what do you make of the white flag shooters? Why are there all these white flag shootings? Why they shoot 3 of their hostages who were waving white flags? Why are they shooting an old lady? That to me seems consistent with either the plausible genocide theory, or if you don't believe that, and that has to be adjudicated, I'll grant you. I'm not saying that is true.
We are taking
Let me finish.
Claims made by people.
No. This is on video. We filmed
IDF policy and military operations, where there is no policy and no evidence that the IDF is directly targeting people simply for staying there. What is happening is that why do you think an evacuation order is issued? Why do you think an evacuation order is issued? What do you think the point of it is? The
Your
entire
bar
point
is so
of it.
low. It's like if they can massacre the people who have an
the entire
evacuated.
point of this. No, I have never said that. The entire point of an evacuation order is if you stay there, this is a direct war zone. You will possibly be harmed. So get out of there. Go south. Which means if you are staying in that zone, you might not be targeted, but you will very likely be harmed or very likely die. It's very obvious. That's why it's an evacuation.
It sounds like you're
And it's very
defending
ironic
the
to
Free
argue
Fire
that
Zone
that
is war crime rather than.
no, I'm not. I'm not doing that at all. You're just putting words in my mouth. So it's very funny that you say that Israel is indiscriminately killing civilians. On the other hand, you are also arguing that they are creating evacuation zones. You're saying they target civilians. On the other hand, you say they drop dumb bombs. So it's a very
These
interesting
terms have specific legal
perspective to have
meanings.
here.
You can be engaged. You can be violating. When you're talking about indiscriminate killing of civilians, you don't mean that they're literally trying to kill every civilian in Gaza, as if it's a Nazi Holocaust. This is a specific war crime that is satisfied by the policy of free fire zones, for example.
All right. So along with that,
It is satisfied by the raising of the strip. The raising of the strip. And 3 months into this so-called war, they destroyed 45% of houses, according to the World Bank, were.
Okay, yeah. Interesting. Now let me ask you a question. Are you aware
that's fine for you? That's
directly
fine
from Gaza?
Okay, we can talk about the polls of the Palestinians.
Are you aware that according to polls, the majority of Gazans support October 7 and support the war efforts? So
So I've seen the polling about. I promise we'll talk about these polling. Yeah, you're correct that the majority support October 7th. Can we just put a button on this for a second, and then I promise we'll come back to it because it's a very important topic, because it relates to the cause of the problem. Yeah, that's true. But let's step back for a second. So you don't have any problem.
But we will address this. I promise. Before we move on, can you acknowledge that? So most Gazans do support October 7th.
The best data we have seems to indicate. I think the figure was 57%, and then much higher for the West Bank.
Thank you. Okay. Continue.
So let's move to 45% of houses. And by the way, this poll was done well into the war, though. So let's be clear about that. So these people were were being massacred when they said this. But yes, that figure was what's been reported by a serious. I don't remember the name of it, but I've seen the data you're referring to. Anyway, you're not disturbed by the fact that 3 months into this war, 45% of the buildings in Gaza, according to the World Bank, had been destroyed. That sounds discriminate to you? Of the houses.
I would say it sounds disturbing and it sounds pretty sad and pretty awful, but you cited the whole principle of proportionality. So it would be now up to Israel to, if asked about this, demonstrate and prove that they violated the principle of proportionality when they did this. It is a very, very normal consequence of a war. There is a very nice article.
It is not normal.
A very interesting
not normal.
It's the
AP.
Written. There's a very interesting article about this published on the Modern War Institute, West Point.
John Spencer, that guy? Is that the guy?
By John Spencer, which is about I know, great genetic fallacy.
It's a total joke. Yeah.
Which is about how it is necessary during war, as seen over and over and over again, to cause destruction in order to save the very place that you are fighting. In the case of Gaza, it is specifically necessary. We have so many testimonies from people themselves in there, from the hostages and from others, that Hamas uses regular civilian buildings and operates from within them, where they keep hostages, where they keep weapons, where they keep all kinds of different things. We have reports of the UN condemning Hamas over and over again for building tunnels under schools and residential buildings. These are all facts. These are all documented, and I have the evidence for.
We don't have to debate whether they embed themselves in civilian infrastructure, because I agree they do that. The term "human shield" is, I think, misleading. I'm not saying no. Let me make this point.
I didn't say human shield.
The term "human shield," I think, misleads more than it adds. I think it's much better to say they embed themselves in civilian infrastructure like schools and hospitals. That conveys the risk they're posing and the war crime they're committing much better than the term human shield, because people think of them commandeering civilians to into war zones, coercing them into stay, and this has not happened at any kind of systematic level that would contribute to the casualties. What they do is they embed themselves in civilian infrastructure, but nevertheless, the episodes I cited, the white flag shootings, for example, no justification, nothing to do with Hamas presence there, or the Flower Massacre as well. No Hamas issue there. The other point is, so I want to mention John Spencer.
Wait. You can't just bring up something like the Flower Massacre and then
go ahead.
Quickly sweep it under the rug. It is something that is a contested issue, and where we have plenty of evidence that the IDF did not cause a massacre, that they did not kill a bunch of people shooting at them.
What is the evidence? The IDF statement? They won't release the video, the full footage.
We have footage which very much shows that
the footage they
released
and then was boomeranged at them, and they refused to. The testimonial evidence supports the idea of a massacre, and the IDF has not explained
which testimonial
evidence of Palestinian witnesses.
Okay, we have also, according to the BBC, Palestinian witnesses who say that the majority of the killings were done by trucks running them over.
Well, whether the majority of killings were done by the trucks is not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is what precipitated the stampede. And what precipitated the stampede, according to the testimonial evidence, is Israel gunfire. Now, this needs to be investigated.
Yeah, okay.
However, this is of a piece with all of these other episodes of shooting people waving white flags, of bombing a hospital, of treating military zones of treating civilians in military areas as if they're fair game or complicitous. There have been so many episodes. There was the other day video of a man being shot who was unarmed, an elderly man, and the guy was talking about it and joking with his buddy. So there's obviously major hooliganism and criminality going on here. Even if I agree that individual cases need to be investigated, but for this case, the Flower Massacre, it seems much more likely to me than not. This is, as the Palestinians are describing.
Yeah, I would leave that up.
Okay, so I got to go back to John Spencer. The fact that you have to cite someone like that really shows how pathetic your case is. I mean, the guy's a charlatan. He says that Ukraine. So I'm totally against Putin's invasion of Ukraine. I think it was absolutely reprehensible. Is it reasonable to assess, as a matter of military, what's going on there militarily, that Putin is engaged in Nazi-style annihilation of the Ukrainian population? That's what he said.
I'm not sure why we're discussing.
It shows he's a polemicist who is not a serious analyst. He just say there's a Nazi-style massacre, extermination of the Ukrainian civilian population is preposterous. There's an unjust war going on in Ukraine.
That's very, very funny. And I'm sure it's very interesting. I'm sure we can go into that, but I'm personally not interested.
But your source is
what you're doing is basically
polemicist.
You're appealing to fallacies here, which is the atomonym and also the genetic fallacy, which is when I bring up a certain article, which I say is interesting in terms of explaining this specific principle, you are then attacking.
Yeah, I'm making an argument about that. He's not a serious analysis.
I'm citing the article. If you have an issue with the article, you can maybe go into the article afterwards if you want to read it. However, this has the guy's background or other things that he says.
No, there's certainly. I think that the reasonable person who's hearing and knows, and I'm sure the reasonable person be against Russia's invasion and hears it characterized as a Nazi-style extermination of the Ukrainian people, would find John Spencer less than serious. And incidentally, there was an article in Just Security the other day, completely debunking his claims about Israel as the gold standard.
Okay, that's still very, very interesting. However, I don't care. Okay. It's not relevant. So here is the thing. You said earlier that Israel shouldn't have been going to war. Israel should have done different measures instead. I just want to ask you a brief question. If Israel followed your plan of acting like the Care Bears and lifting the blockade and listening to Palestinian efforts and so on, and Hamas still attacked Israel, would it then be justified for Israel to wage war?
Yeah, if Hamas attacked Israel after the blockade was lifted, occupation ended, colonization of the West Bank ended, yeah, Israel would have the right to, as a recognized nation that would no longer be engaged in war crimes, Israel would have the right to wage war at that point. Yeah.
Okay, so then what exactly is it that you think Israel is doing wrong? Which
Let
is
me
why
tell you what.
Hamas
Can I
is
tell you what I think
waging-
Israel should do?
is
So
attacking Israel.
the ultimate problem here, the ultimate problem, and this relates to solutions. The ultimate problem here is what you mentioned. That now this may be. I think this is inflated by the fact that they're being massacred right now, and it's also being inflated by maybe conspiracy theories. But nevertheless, as you said, 57% of Gazans support the October 7th, right? And actually, you're going to say Muslim, but 60% of Lebanese Christians support October 7th, according to polling. So this is not, and Lebanese Druze, the vast majority do too. So this is not just Islam. This is ultimately about the fact that based on a claim, a kind of romantic, pseudo-religious claim, that people, originally they were European, now there's a ton of obviously Middle Eastern Jews there, but the original Zionists were European people who, because of ancient ancestry in Israel, thought they were morally entitled to go there and demand partition of the land. No. I'm giving you an explanation as to why, as to the causes of the Palestinian hatred. That's what I'm trying to explain. Because the Palestinian hatred is the foreign policy issue. The foreign policy issue is Palestinian hatred of Israelis and support for terrorism. And the reason for
I got to finish this. Interesting thing to say. Can you explain to me what exactly makes Hamas attack Israel relentlessly?
I have to give you.
What should they be stopping?
My 90-second spiel, and then you can respond. I'll give you 3 minutes. So, the cause of this, Ridvan, is that they see Israel rightly as foreigners who came, stole their land, ethnically cleansed them, have occupied them ever since, and have continued to steal their land and continue to colonize the West Bank, for example.
How long have they been occupying Gaza?
In terms of the Gaza occupation, this is another thing I wanted to mention. So first of all, whether or not you call it occupation isn't relevant. They control the airspace, they control the waterways. The blockade,
how long have they been
Gaza's
West
paradise. They've occupied the West Bank since '67. In terms of now,
exactly. So why did you say 75 years?
Because Ridvan, after the so-called War of Independence, Israel occupied its own Arab population, the Israeli Arabs. There was martial law until 1966, and until 1967, really, because they had the police enforcing it, and they stole their land. So you guys excuse, it's war. They stole the land of the Israeli Arabs who didn't leave. Under the absentee property law, they plundered them. If you were first of all, they had no freedom of movement. This is until 67. And they had no freedom of movement. And they just stole their land because it's under this absentee property law they passed in 1950. They could take the land of any Palestinian who was no longer there. So that included the ethnically cleansed people. It also included Israeli Arabs. They just stole the land. Look, the United States paid reparations to the Native Americans for stealing their land. It was like, I don't remember. They did. They paid reparations. You can make some argument that because of
you're seriously
absolutely,
absolutely Native American
100%. The Palestinians are indigenous to the land.
Wow.
Okay, so let's debate this. You think it's absurd? Why aren't they indigenous to the land?
Do you think the Palestinians themselves have claimed for a long time now that they are not, that they are different, that they are indigenous people to the land who are not Arabs?
I'm going to read you a quotation from Benny Morris's.
I can read you a quotation from Hamas Charter, which says that they are Arabs.
Of course, they are. Ridvan, I don't think you know what Arabs are. Arabs can encompass multiple.
Yes, I know exactly. I know exactly what Arabs are.
Are Sudanese Arabs?
What? Are Sudanese people?
They are Arabs. The vast majority are Arabs.
They're not ethnic Arabs, but they are.
Okay, there you go. There you go.
What? Okay, this is what I mean. This is what I mean. Arab is basically a cultural group that also at some point turns into an ethnicity, which is why because it develops in a certain environment with people who share a culture of language, of interbreeding, and so on. When it comes to Palestinians, it is very, very much established that a significant proportion of Palestinians are people who became Arabized after the Arab invasion.
Absolutely false. Utter nonsense.
They
are not. They're a DNA denier.
They're very much genetically similar. They're very much genetically similar to Arabs and also to certain other populations in the Levant. What are you talking about?
Ridvan, they are genetically mostly Levantine. They have some, we're talking about genetics, they have some admixture from the Gulf. Yeah, they're mostly from the land. The Ashkenazi Jews who came are mostly not from the land. This is not according to me. This is according to, God, what the hell is the guy's name? Razib Khan, a major HB journalist.
That's a big,
no, it's all fact. It's completely true.
Yeah,
the vast majority.
A lot of the Palestinians are extremely ethnically diverse.
The vast majority
are black. They're similar to Iraqi Jews and Mizrahi Jews.
No, the vast majority of Palestinians, the overwhelming majority, well over 90%. This is based on thousands of samples. I've looked into this claim because of all the lies your side tells about them not being indigenous, so you can ethnically cleanse them. Over 90% of them, yeah, they're black Palestinians.
Nobody ever said such a thing.
Yes, it is true.
That's a straw man. That's a straw man.
Overwhelming majority are indigenous to the land. They're not Gulf Arabs.
Redirect us, gentlemen. Just back to the main topic.
I'm going to just read one quick quote from, not about genetics, but just about Palestinian identity. This is Jabotinsky. This is Righteous Victims Benny Morris, talking about the Palestinians in 1923. Palestine will remain for the Palestinians not a borderland, but their birthplace, the center and basis of their own national existence. They, meaning the Palestinians, look upon Palestine with the same instinctive love and true fervor that any Aztec looked upon Mexico. So obviously, Jabotinsky understood they were indigenous to the land. And the cause of let's go back to the debate, though. The cause of this.
Just one thing to point out here. When you say indigenous to the land, we're talking about indigenous to the Levant. Indigenous to the Levant includes many different groups that are currently in the Levant. Armenians that are in the land often make the very same claim because they can very much establish that they have a lot in common with people who are also in the Levant. However, they can trace their ancestry to people who were much further north. Lebanese people are quite similar in genetics to Palestinian people. Other people in Iraq are quite similar to them because what this means is when you say they have genetics that are in the Levant, what that means is not that they are a certain people who were untouched and who were in that region forever. It means that they share commonalities with the genetics of other people throughout the entirety of the Levant.
I think we've had a back and forth.
According to the Palestinians themselves, most of them trace their roots to the Arab world. This is obvious.
No, they trace their roots to Palestine.
That they are Arabs.
They identify as Palestinians with the land. That's ridiculous.
So when they say I am from Egypt, or
that's like a meme you have. There may be someone named Al Mustri.
My ancestry is from Egypt. Does that mean that they're
most Palestinians do not identify as Egyptian?
Let's just to hear AP as well.
That's the third most popular family name in the Palestinian territories because they trace their ancestry to Egyptians.
So he can finish.
It's not an assertion. I can prove it. That's not an assertion.
Ridvan. First of all, Ashkenazi Jews have European names. Big shock to you. So the surname argument is ridiculous. If you're trying to,
I am not the one who is claiming that.
You are saying they're not indigenous. You are saying they're not. You are claiming they're not indigenous to the land. So the surname argument is laughably stupid. There's a Palestinian on Twitter called El Kurd. He understands that means he has some distant paternal ancestor who's Kurdish. It doesn't mean he's of mostly Kurdish descent. Ridvan, I'm half Egyptian and I have an English name. It doesn't change the fact that I'm half Egyptian. Like all your surname says is you have a paternal ancestor that.
Matt, what's happening is that you're misunderstanding something here. I am not the one arguing that
you said they're not indigenous today.
Has right to the land because they have this undisturbed, unpolluted indigenous genetics that are tied to the land. This is a claim that you are basically making. I'm not making such a claim. I am acknowledging that the people in that region are very, very much ethnically diverse, people who came from the outside mixed with the local population and so on. Palestinians who went away from there a long time ago and mixed with other populations are ethnically diverse and might still have traces that lead back to ancient populations of the land. Jews that were at some point there and moved out and over centuries interbred with other populations might have ancestry to that land. That doesn't mean anything. It certainly does not mean that the Palestinians are a population that has always been there undisturbed. And the average person that is today identifying as a Palestinian is somebody who is, I don't know, very much identical to the people who lived there 2,000 years ago. It is a regular thing in the world that populations move around and mix with other populations. If Arabs move around and mix with populations that are in this land, then they will, of course, have traces to ancient populations living there. That doesn't mean that they are indigenous and have an exclusive right to this land.
Let me respond. So 2 points. First, exclusive right, I'll address this second. What happened in history is that these people were there, and we've gone back and forth about genetics. We don't need to talk about that anymore. I think I was much more convincing than you on that. I've shown that that Jabotinsky acknowledged they had the Palestinian identity in 1923. So they clearly, you're erroneous, your statements about this. So these people identify as Palestinian. They're mostly descended from the land. Then foreigners come who say that we were here 2,000 years ago, European Jews at the time it was, and they demand a partition of their land. Nobody would accept this. Nobody would accept this. It's absurd to say the Palestinians should have accepted it, especially given that the first plan, the Peel plan, involved ethnic cleansing, and ethnic cleansing was inbuilt and inevitable in Zionism, as Benny Morris says. So the sin that started this conflict was Zionism, the idea that we're going to come to this land because we were here 2,000 years ago based on romanticism or religion, and not only go there to live, which is fine. They can go there and live there if they want. I would have no problem with that. But they wanted to have a Jewish state, a Jewish majority state, which meant ethnic cleansing and land theft, which is in fact what happened. So they came there, they demanded the land of the, let me finish my point. They demanded the land of the indigenous people, and they stole their land, ethnically cleansed them. That is the problem, and those are things that need to be addressed in addition to occupation if you're going to solve the terrorism. That's what the Palestinians care about. They care about the...
Let's grant for a second that they are indeed invaders who came here and stole the land and they don't have no right to it and so on. What do you suggest the current Israelis or Israel should be doing right now?
They should do what the United States did with the Native Americans. So you have to be pragmatic about this, right? They need to, first of all, pay compensation for land they stole under the 1950 absentee property law. They just said, oh, they ethnically cleansed the people, and then they passed a law saying if you're not here, we get to steal land. They even stole land from Arab Israelis, as I said. They apologize, pay reparations. And I think we should, in the long run, we can't do this in the short run, but we should, in the long run, move toward a vision of allowing the indigenous people to come back to their land, which is what they want.
This is so ridiculous. So you're thinking, you're making it look like Israel can just say, oh, you know what, guys, we stole your land, and here are all the reparations and compensations for that. Okay, you know, let's move on. It's not going to happen.
I'm telling you what's
this is not a demand. This is not a demand even made by Palestinian terrorist organizations, and not ever stated as the end goal, not even by the PLO. The closest you can come to this was offers made to the PLO in the past, including giving most of the West Bank to them, leaving it, removing the settlements, ending the occupation, and recognizing an independent Palestinian state. Why was that not enough? It was rejected by the Palestinians.
There was never a Palestinian state after the establishment of Israel offered. In 2000, the so-called state offered would have involved Israeli autonomy over Palestinian foreign policy, a demilitarized state. That's not a sovereign state. In fact, Rabin, let me finish. Rabin said after Oslo that he's against a Palestinian state. So we're so biased because of the extreme Hasbara and the level of media propaganda. We think that this 2000 deal was amazing when Israel has basing rights and controls the airspace and controls the right to Palestinians enter trees. It's not even a sovereign state. Moreover, it wasn't in all the land that they're entitled to under international law. So it was a terrible deal.
You know, you can as much as you want argue that that Israel shouldn't have a right to limit the Gazan airspace or sea access and so on. To be frank, I don't care. Israel doesn't care because on the one hand, you have a state that is prospering and taking care of its own civilization so much that the majority of Israeli Arabs say they are happy in Israel. On the other hand, you have a government that is a terrorist organization like Hamas that says we will not stop until we are completely rid of them, and elements within their own speakers say we want to cleanse the Jews of Palestine. I'm sorry, but if Israel, as a response to that, deems it necessary to say we will control the airspace and the coast and make sure that there is no militarization, I say that this is completely justified. You can argue as much as you want against that. Frankly, I don't care.
I'm talking about the state that was offered in 2000. I'm not talking about the state that was offered would have had Israeli control over the Palestinian states.
But you also just suggested that Israel should lift the blockade.
Yeah, they should lift the blockade. Yeah.
Why? So you can argue that as much
so
as you want.
In the Vietnam War, the Viet Cong committed horrible massacres. At Hue alone, they killed more civilians than died October 7th. Far more atrocities than even this terrible thing Hamas did. It doesn't mean the United States was in the right in Vietnam. I think we have a very myopic view of this atrocity, and we're not looking at what is the root of Palestinian hatred. In fact, it's very justified: occupation, land theft, torture chambers, and so forth for 75 years.
When did Israel steal land? When did this begin?
Okay.
When did they begin to steal land?
It began it began during the war. So I actually have
Which war?
The 1948 war. So here's an example.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What happened during the 1948? What happened 1 year before the 1948?
Okay, so you accept. Okay, let me get this straight though. You accept that they stole land.
No, right? I'm just. Okay. No, I'm not. I'm granting you something for the sake of the argument and asking you what happened in the year before.
Yeah, the Arabs declared war because any population, any indigenous population would. If you went to Ireland before the Irish had a modern state in 1920 and said Irish Americans who had ancestry from hundreds of years ago said we're going to partition Ireland. We want two states. We want an Irish American state. The Irish wouldn't have accepted this. No one would accept the immigrants coming in based on thousands-year-old ancestry and myth to partition their land. Yeah, it makes total sense that they rejected it. What the Zionists should have.
What do you think the Zionists should have done in 1948 instead of responding to the war and fighting? Should they have left?
I don't think they should have ethnically.
Okay, you know what? We don't belong here. We should just leave. We should get out of here.
No, I think they should.
Do you maybe think they should leave right now? What do you think?
I think they should have pursued a one-state solution in 19. I think they should have. I think when the 1939 White Paper passed, you laugh. Ibn Saud said he had no problem during the negotiations for the 1939 White Paper with Jews living in a Palestinian state. I mean, if you're an immigrant, you should accept this.
A one-state solution where the Arabs are in charge and ruling over all kinds of affairs, and the Jews are subjects of that state. That's what you are saying.
Yeah, if you in the 19, I'm talking about now in the 19. I'm not saying in terms of right now. That's a different situation. Originally,
back then, okay, yes, 1948.
Yeah, originally, if you're coming to the land as immigrants based on a very tenuous claim that we were here thousands of years ago, yeah, you should adapt to the normative culture, which means they should have been a minority. Yeah.
Okay, so on one hand, you have a population that says, hey, we want to live in peace and we don't want to be threatened. On the other hand, you have a population that says you shouldn't even be here. And its leaders say these guys have a conspiracy to eradicate us and to destroy our temples and mosques and this and that. We should therefore destroy them. A leader who even goes and makes a deal with Hitler. And you expect the Jews to just say, oh, you know what, it seems reasonable. Let's just become subjects of these people who even meet up with Hitler in order to destroy us.
I think you're confusing cause and effect here. By the late 1930s, as Benny Morris acknowledges in Righteous Victims, acknowledges in The Birth of the Palestinian Refugee Problem, the consensus among the Zionist movement was transfer, was ethnic cleansing. That was the consensus view, right? So, yeah, by the time al-Husseini, and he has responsibility for this, of course, is partnering with the Nazis, which is not in 1933, it's not in 1935, it's 1939, Israel is committed. The Yishuv is committed to transfer ethnic cleansing as a matter of principle.
That's not the principle on the side of the Zionists is not ethnic cleansing. You are misquoting here. And doing
you are misunderstanding.
What the idea? The idea was that the Arabs are posing a threat and repeatedly trying to remove us Jews from our own places. We have to make sure that we create spaces. But didn't that happen in 1936?
Let me read the passage. Morris is not being misquoted. This is a ridiculous claim.
Okay. What the Zionists are therefore saying is, in order to prevent this, we have to make sure that we create an environment where we are not minorities.
I'm going to read Morris. You say Destiny, the Wikipedia guy, said he was misrepresenting Morris.
Go ahead.
Transfer this is Benny Morris, was inevitable and inbuilt into Zionism because it sought to transform a land which was Arab into a Jewish state, and a Jewish state could not have arisen without a major displacement of Arab populations. And because this aim automatically produced resistance among the Arabs, which in turn persuaded the Yeshuv's leaders that a hostile Arab majority or large minority could not remain in place. So the cause is transfer leads to the backlash of the Arabs because they're afraid of being displaced. That's what Morris says. And then that in turn strengthens the consensus for transfer. That's what he argues.
Okay.
So the reason Palestinians were sympathetic, some, and you mentioned al-Husseini, the king of the memes. He's one leader.
That's not just some random guy. He was
no, he's not. But he was appointed by the British.
The leader of the
Palestinian. He's from a prominent. Okay, he's appointed by the British. He was an exiled
he was then
of Jerusalem.
He was then removed by the British, exiled, and he was
he had no official position.
And he was recognized by the Arab League as the representative of the Palestinian people, and also put in charge of the Arab Higher Committee or All Palestine Government by Egypt. He was recognized as the representative.
He was briefly a part of that thing, and then
he was the leader of it. What are you talking about?
Yeah, but not. No, he was the leader technically. It was more of a nominal role, and then he left that position, I believe.
So was he a leader or not? He was a leader.
He's definitely a leader, but to portray him as the only leader is just silly.
And here's the thing: we're not talking just about some random guy who was just appearing on the scene and leaving. We are talking about a guy, Mufti Amin al-Husseini, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. The guy met with Hitler and clearly made a plan with Hitler to, after Hitler is done with the Soviets and the British.
I literally have a paper coming out about this. It's nonsense.
And collaborate in destroying the Jewish element under British.
No, I literally have a paper calling it. The quote is there's two translations of this quote in the.
I read the German document.
There's Groba and Schmidt. I've read the German document. So there's Groba and Schmidt. There's two specific translations. One of them talks about one of them talks about destruction of the the body protecting the Jews, and then the other talks about destruction of the Jews. So there are competing translations, and my assessment is that the translation referring to destruction of the body protecting the Jews, namely the British mandate, is the accurate one. But that's a little bit. We're getting in the weeds a bit. My contention here.
Cool. So the leader of the Palestinian movement back then did meet with Hitler and did make.
Can I make this point?
To collaborate can I
please
against the Jews?
Yeah, there's no question he did that.
Great.
But I follow Morris's chronology.
Could we establish that?
Yeah, no, there's no. Of course, that happened. Who could deny that? There's 2 points. Okay. First of all, the chronology. You have the chronology wrong. The transfer, the support for transfer, is what, as Morris says, by the late 1930s, a consensus among the Zionists, inbuilt and inevitable in Zionism, is what led Palestinians to violently resist. That's what Morris writes. Morris writes that what led Palestinians to resist is the fear of displacement.
I need to get back and read on that, but I'm pretty sure that that is not the
100% true.
Because it can't be, because I'm pretty sure I remember his history of running down of how the Palestinian attacks happened long before the 40s and 30s, including, for example,
they were not
including the
in the 1890s,
1929 Hebron massacre.
In the 18, you know why they were happening? Because the Yishuv was buying Palestinian land and then expelling the tenant farmers. That was a systematic practice.
Okay.
So that's
legal.
Regardless of whether it's illegal, some illiterate peasant who has known no other life, his father's known no other life, is going to be angry and alienated, horrified and furious after that happens. And it reflects the broader intention to take the land.
Look, I agree with you. There is a human element to this. A person who lives on the land, who is not in charge of the land, but who just lives there and who makes a living on this land, and doesn't know anything about the law. If this person is one day told this land has been bought by somebody else, you have to leave and go somewhere else, they will be frustrated, and then they will see it as their life being stolen and taken away, and they will be hostile. However, being ignorant is not really a fantastic excuse here, because what is actually happening behind the scenes is that a Jewish organization is coming and buying that land legally, completely normally and regularly, and thereby having now a say over that land and saying, this land belongs to me now, and I want to use it for different purposes, so you have to leave. If you think that justifies violence, then that means somebody who is evicted today should also...
We're not talking about morally justified violence. I'm trying to have a realistic conversation here. I am saying that if they're systematically displacing people, and they initially did it within the scope of the law, there's going to be a backlash. And moreover, Morris writes in Righteous Victims, the backlash was centered around the fear that the Jews are going to take the land. They're trying to take the land. They're trying to kick us off. That is all over the place in Palestinian magazines, newspapers at the time. That is the core fear, and that was the source of the backlash among Christian and Muslim Palestinians. And therefore, the Zionist project, which didn't seek to go there and live with the Palestinians, but to take the land, to have a 2 states, to partition it based on this incredibly ridiculous, like this pseudo-religious, laughable claim that because 2,000 years ago a minority of your ancestors were there, you have a right to not only go there, well, that's fine, but to partition the land. No, that is the stupidity of Zionism, which caused this whole problem. This
keep
crazy
going back
idea.
to that and deflecting from the thing that we're talking about right
now.
No,
I'm not deflecting. So I'm saying it makes perfect sense they were against partition. And the reason that they were sympathetic, although al-Husseini has responsibility for collaborating with this horrible regime, the reason he was sympathetic to them and that some Palestinians is because they saw them as the enemy of the British and the enemy of Zionism, right? It's horrible, but that makes real politics sense.
What we have established so far is that the Zionist movement, which, by the way, doesn't just consist of people who are, who are in Europe and moving there. I mean, right now the Israeli population
overwhelmingly did originally.
Currently, the Israeli population, for example, is mostly not even Ashkenazi, but and has no ties to Europe. But so what we're talking about is the Zionist movement comes and makes a plan. Initially, they think we should collaborate with whoever is in charge of the land. Then World War II ensues. Ottomans lose the land, British take over under the leadership of the League of Nations. They say this should be used to create a state for the people there. Eventually, it's the League of Nations recognizes that the Jewish people should have a land there for them with respect of all the rights of the local population that is there as well. And then the Zionists come, and what they do until 1948, or you could argue certain parts of 1947, they buy land. They buy and buy and buy and buy and buy. Nobody comes in and just violently kicks somebody out. They buy land and then take it over. As a response to that, the Arab side thinks, oh no, these guys want to take all of our land and destroy us and kick us out. We should fight them. I'm sorry, but you could say these people have concerns and are therefore fighting. Okay, but this is not internationally justifiable. It wasn't justifiable back then, and you can't make the claim that because of their fears, their attacks on the Jews were justified.
I've not been arguing that massacres by either Jews or Arabs in this period were justified.
But you did argue that.
I'm arguing that the provocation.
The Zionists had the position that they should make a population change. I'm sorry, if the Zionists are repeatedly attacked by the Arab side, repeatedly undergo pogroms, repeatedly are removed from places like Hebron, which were for centuries populated by Jews, then of course the Zionists will say, you know what, we should make sure that we are not dominated by these people because they want to kill us.
As Morris says, now he pretends he didn't mean it, but people have actually read the book, which I have, The Birth of the Palestinian Refugee Problem Revisited. He clearly argues that because the vision of a Jewish state meant a Jewish robust majority, you cannot have an Arab majority or a very large minority. So you needed to have population change. You need to have ethnic cleansing. There's no other way to do it. That is Morris's argument. He probably is moving away from that now because he wants to debate with Destiny about how great Israel is. But that's the argument. And the project of trying to build a Jewish state in Palestine was the cause of the conflict. And the crimes that entailed are what need to be resolved if you want to get Palestinians to stop hating Israelis, and that is the cause of the terrorism. Notice I'm not using morally inflected terms. They shouldn't hate Israelis. They shouldn't support terrorism, but they do because they stole their land, and they're foreigners who came and stole their land and ethnically cleansed them, and have occupied them ever since, as we talked about, including the Arab Israelis for a time. So that's the cause of this. And there needs to be apology, reparations, and a long-term vision. We can't have a short-term vision. A long-term vision of some kind of right of return, and a short-term policy two-state solution with full.
I'm pretty sure that the whole idea of a right of return is completely out of question and will never happen. And this is actually the only reason why this conflict is basically going on, because Western people still entertain this idea of a possible return, right of return, which will not happen. Why would these people who are living a happy and peaceful life accept that all of these people should come back into a land who don't want them to exist there, who according to polls way before the war say that a two-state solution is not enough, we should eventually have all of the land. And this, by the way, leads to something which you repeatedly say that they don't want to live with Arabs, that they don't want to recognize an Arab population, ethnic cleansing, genocide, whatever. During the foundation of Israel in 1948, the Israelis themselves acknowledged that there would be an Arab population inside Israel, and that the feelings of this Arab population should be taken into account.
Which lived under martial law for 19 years, which had land systematically stolen from them, as I mentioned.
And yet they weren't
genocided.
They weren't exterminated. 20% of the population today. Okay, they're doing very well.
The point actually about Israeli Arabs is interesting. So first of all, you shouldn't whitewash the history of their own land. They lost about half their land through expropriation and Judaization after the war. However, it is true that Israeli Arabs are by far the least anti-Semitic Arab population. In fact,
yes, and they're also happy.
I haven't seen that data, but I believe you. In fact, they almost all overwhelmingly opposed October 7th. So this is rather interesting. They're the same people essentially, but they're living in a state with Israel, and they weren't denied a right to live in their ancestral home. So this makes me believe that you can't do it in the short run. There's way too much hatred. But if you allow the indigenous population to return in the long run, they integrate in the way the Arab Israelis have. There's no reason to believe that they intrinsically will hate the Jews, because they're co-ethnics with the same culture, same origins, don't, right? So I think I agree with you that right of
because Israel is
the problem is the Palestinians will keep look. I know a bunch of Palestinians. I've lived in the region. I speak Arabic. Their grievances are not. It's not Islam. The Al-Aqsa Mosque that plays a role, but like the big grievance is they stole our land and kicked us out. That is a big grievance, right? And the way to address that grievance is to apologize and invite them back in. Now, I'm not saying you invite them back in tomorrow. There'd have to be preconditions met. You'd have to have like stages of de-radicalization, no terrorism, and this. It would take years, decades, and so on. I'm not saying you could have right of return in the short run, but I think if you adopted,
this is
well, you know what's unrealistic? Israel continuing as this because its neighbors all hate it, and the United States just props it up. Like it is a cold peace with Egypt.
That would happen anyway, because the Arab side was from the beginning, as you stated as well.
No, if you address these issues
against the existence of a Jewish state altogether, they will never.
If you address these issues, I believe that Arabs, if Israel actually apologized for stealing the land, kicking out the indigenous population, I believe not. And conditional on this would also be accountability for Palestinian war crimes. I believe you could have, in the long run, you would need to have preconditions and a long process of de-radicalization. You could have the people living together. The short-term policy needs to be a two-state solution.
Very long process.
Sure, I agree with you. It can't be. You'd have civil war.
You said before, although I didn't bring it up. You said before several times that the Islamic aspect is not a big deal or not that big of a problem and all that. I brought this up recently in the debate with Daniel Kikic, which you saw, and also on many different occasions, but it is not only Gaza, but also the West Bank, where repeatedly the narrative of eventually having the religious obligation to fight and exterminate the Jews is brought up again and again and again. Mm-hmm. Two people who go to the mosque. You go to the Friday prayer, and this is being taught to you by the imam.
The end of the
you turn on the TV. Okay. You turn on the TV, and it is taught to you on TV.
I agree.
I'll give you a chance to wrap up AP, so it doesn't go on too long. But then history speaks. If you can, let's let AP finish this point, and then we'll maybe give you the same amount of time. We will give you the same amount of time for AP.
Yeah. So you will bring up, of course, the idea that this is eschatology. It doesn't really matter. I grew up as a Muslim. I know how Muslims grow up. I see them all the time. In Islam, it is taught, it has been taught for a long time, that the Muslims will eventually, and this is necessary to happen in order for the hour to come, Muslims will fight the Jews and kill them wherever they find them, and even rocks and trees will say, there's a Jew behind me, come and kill him. And they are taught that this will eventually happen. It will happen before the hour comes, and Muslims always have this obsession with the hour being possibly quite soon, and the signs appearing. This has been a trend for 1,400 years. So you can say as much as you want that this is about eschatology. It doesn't really matter. Muslims believe that this is the eventual thing that will happen. And in the Palestinian territories, under Hamas extensively, but also under the West Bank, under Fatah, it has been taught, and people have been indoctrinated from childhood with this for many, many years. So expecting Israel to just let these people in and slowly re-educate them and all of that, this is a bit of a fantasy. You're muted.
Okay, so I don't look. This is obviously, first of all, it's eschatology, and you have similar doctrines in Christianity where Jesus is going to toss all the non-believers into the lake of fire, and that includes the Jews and so on. So it's eschatology. It isn't practically relevant for what Muslims are supposed to do. And second, yeah, is it emphasized? Yes. And I believe it's emphasized in large part because of the conflict. I don't believe for a second that Arab Israelis are as fixated on this, for example, who are Muslim, as Arabs in the West Bank are, or Gaza. So no, I think the religious issue is very secondary. It's two people fighting over land. It's an indigenous population like the Native Americans, as the analogy I gave earlier, which I absolutely stand by, caring about their land, feeling like they've been displaced, their land was stolen, which it was, and that they've been occupied since and haven't had autonomy. It's basically national autonomy and wanting to return to their land. That is why they hate the Israelis. And if the Israelis address those problems, you will have a decrease in terrorism, in support for terrorism. Even in the 1990s, as flawed as the Oslo process was, you had now you have majority of Palestinians supporting terrorism, right? October 7th, we talked about. In the 1990s, the figure was about 20%, 30%, even fell as low as 5.8% or something like that, 6% in one poll. So when the Palestinians thought they were on the path to a state, support for terrorism fell. So I think that shows you that appeasing their grievances really does reduce support for terrorism. And if you went further and said, we are in the long run committed to some kind of right of return if conditions are met, and obviously not going to do that in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, but just as a vision for them, and an apology for what happened, I think, and a state, right, in the short run, a state, in the 1967 borders, I think you'd have a huge decrease in radicalization. Because I think, I think they're rooted, ultimately, I think the problem is they support killing Israelis, they support terrorism, and that attitude is like the Viet Cong's attitude, like Native Americans. It's rooted in national aspirations that are being denied.
Well, the time is passing, and generations are moving away from what happened so long ago. And today's Israelis, despite being significantly, repeatedly targeted, still don't generally hate the other side as much as the other side hates the Israelis. It's like polls show like 95% of them say they hate Jews. it's simply ridiculous. Israel is educating its own population and preventing them from being radicalized, like the Gazans, like the Palestinians, which is why Israeli Arabs don't grow to adopt the very same things. Israel is making sure to even distance, which I think, in my opinion, is not even a good thing to do. But Israel does it anyway because they think it's healthy for the population, to separate Islam from Islamic radicalism and to say all these things that the Palestinians do, it has nothing to do with Islam. Islam is not like that. Which is and the Israeli Arabs are very, very moderate compared to the Palestinian Arabs, which is why 50% of them or more say they are proud to be Israelis, which is a huge thing.
Yeah, I think again. So again, it's important to mention the history of their land was stolen, the Israeli Arabs, and they were occupied for 18 years. But nevertheless, now their situation is much better, right? They're not living in the apartheid conditions of the West Bank or in the internment camp of Gaza. So their situation is much better. They live on their ancestral land, and they're de-radicalized. I think the case of the Israeli Arabs, which you cite, is, for in your case, supports my case, that if you address the issues, so these people have citizenship in Israel, right? They're given citizenship. They're no longer occupied. They're no longer treated the way they were. the radicalization will decrease. And if you're saying it's Muslim Islam, it doesn't really make sense of why they're so much more moderate, because they're Muslim too in the large majority, the Israeli Arabs.
Good, good. All right.
With that,
James.
this is probably a great time to go into the Q&A. I want to do a couple of quick housekeeping things in particular, folks. If you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. We have many more debates coming up. And also want to let you know, our guests are linked in the description. I highly encourage you, even if you disagree, there's a value before. In other words, there's a value getting it straight from the horse's mouth. You can truly understand where they're coming from by checking out their channels. They're linked below. That includes with the podcast all of our debates end up on the podcast within about 24 hours of them being live. So if you listen to Apple Podcasts, and this one, we might, if you're wondering where this debate is later, it's a small chance we might make this podcast only. We are trying to drive people to the podcast because, hey, right now, I got to tell you, folks, it's super convenient. If you have issues like data problems where you got like low service, whatever it is, I want you to be able to take advantage of that. We're going to jump into the questions here. Thanks very much for all of your questions. Forget anything? I think we're good. Okay.
Sorry, could I just have like 10 seconds, James?
In terms of more open dialogue?
No. I'm just going to step away and come back.
Oh, yeah, no problem. We'll do housekeeping stuff while you step away. Folks, want to let you know we have channel memberships. I always forget to mention this. We do have channel memberships and we do have a Patreon. So if you want to support Modern Day Debate, we do appreciate that support. It's something that I am excited to be done with my PhD soon. And it is something that I am considering. It's a possibility. I'm kind of deciding, am I going to go full time as a psychologist or modern day debate? I do think I want to try being a psychologist, but I am kind of like, I do love modern day. It's so fun. I love modern day debate. And so I am sometimes thinking like, man, could I do this full time? Like, could that work? And so we do appreciate all of your support of modern day debate. And want to let you know though, we have big plans. This is my first time that I've been able to host for like 3 weeks. And I wanted to, especially for this debate, very important debate. I appreciate both of our guests, AP and History Speaks, and want to let you know it's been super busy. So I appreciate all of your guys' support of Modern Day Debate. Justin and Ryan, as our guest mods, have done a fantastic job filling in for me so Modern Day Debate can stay active. My data collection for my dissertation has been beyond laborious. It's been just insane where I'm doing a survey online. It has a nice incentive. So we pay, it's $20 for a 12-minute survey. We've had bots, bull rush my survey to where it's been such a pain trying to figure out which are genuine responses and which are bots. It's not as easy as you think. It's actually like a lot of these bots are
You can do it.
the AI is getting smarter. So we're going to jump into this Q&A. Thank you for your vote of confidence. And this one coming in from Himsake. Thanks for your kind words. And Megan Marie says, to both, in your opinions, what do you think could end this war?
That's a very, very easy question to ask and a very hard one to answer. I don't know. I don't think I'm in any position to actually give a proper opinion on that. It's too complicated to just sit down and say, if they just do this and this and this and this, it will end. In my opinion, in my simplest opinion, Hamas needs to surrender, release the hostages, and abstain from existing, and give the control over the Gaza Strip over to Israel, and then a solution will possibly come in the future. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that the way to end the war is for the United States to coerce Israel into stopping, to stop supplying them with the armaments, and or condition that on the end of the war if they prefer to give Israel weapons, which I'm sure they do. But the United States could easily exercise leverage to get Israel to accept a long-term ceasefire with Hamas in exchange for the hostages, which Hamas is clearly open to. If you listen to Biden's interview the other day.
I'm going to stop the video, folks, if you're watching online. Just a minute. I'm going to stop the video for all participants in the Zoom chat just because right now we are having such a bad connection. So do hang in there with us, folks. As I am turning off the video, I'm going to try to make this a little bit smoother in terms of us being able to stream this, where your connection will hopefully be, this will be a little bit less taxing on our connection. So bear with me, folks. I do realize that I see you in live chat saying that it's buffering, and you're right, it is buffering. And I'm working on trying to figure this out because I've never had a connection issue like this. So hang with us. It should be a little bit less load on the bandwidth as I the video down. And this next question coming in, hopefully, let me know though in chat if you can at least hear, because that's the big thing. We want to be sure that you can hear, and then we'll turn the video back on once our connection is caught up. So this one coming in from the Uralic tribe says, Matt, why are you lying about Gaza having historical Muslim, Islamic, Arab significance when the name Palestine comes from the word Philistines, who had Greek roots, who were invading and hurting Jewish people?
Okay, so is volume working?
Yes.
Okay. Well, Palestine obviously has Muslim significance because of Al-Quds or Jerusalem, done with Iraq and so forth, historically. In terms of the Palestinian identity, it emerged, if I don't sure know if the question was talking about Islam or meant Palestinian identity, but the Palestinian identity emerges. Benny Morris has said, Rashid Khalidi has said that it emerges by the 1920s. It's a normative by the 1920s, right? That's at the same time that quote I read by Jabotinsky. Before then, people would identify as Nablusi or from Jaffa or from Jerusalem, or they would identify as Shami, Levantine, or from Greater Syria. But there was always or from southern Syria, right? That was also identity. But as Khalidi shows, there was always pardon me, not always. There was long before the conflict was the foundation of this identity, which becomes explicitly Palestinian, not just Levantine, not just from the city of Nablus, not just from the city of Jaffa or Jerusalem, but Palestinian. Is articulated in the late 19th century and then becomes mainstream by the 1920s.
This one coming in from Robin Webster says, History speaks, how much of Israel is occupied Palestinian land? Is it possible for Hamas to live in peace with Israel within a two-state solution?
Look, I think that part of a two-state settlement would require, and I would favor it requiring, by the way, the Palestinians to forsake violence against Israel as a means of vindicating rights, historical rights, like the right of return, and also recognizing Israel. So you'd have to have either Hamas change in a credible way, right? That is viewed as credible by Israel and the international community, or you'd have to have other bodies in charge of Palestine. My expectation, Hamas is not particularly popular in Gaza pre-war, at any rate, and I think now it's quite unpopular. We talked about support for October 7th, but that's different than support of Hamas as a group, and I think you're likely to see them marginalized pretty quickly after this war. But in any case, there has to be recognition and peace for two-state settlement.
You got it. And thank you very much for your question. This one coming in from, do appreciate it, Robin Webster Strikes Again, says, why did Hamas advise civilians to remain? History speaks.
I have to say I'm not aware of this happening in a systematic way, and I don't want to deny it because that's my inclination, but I don't want to deny it because if it's happening, this is something I should look into. So I just have to say I do not know that they did this in a systematic fashion, which would be the relevance of it. What I do know is that Hamas did not prevent any kind of systematic level people from leaving, and they in fact did evacuate, which is why, despite the horrible casualties, which are again, as Ridvan didn't even attempt to rebut, are higher than any war if in a monthly basis and a rate of killing civilians, other than genocidal wars for decades. They haven't. It would be much higher still, given that they're raising the Strip, Israel, if they hadn't allowed effectively this huge departure of civilians. So civilians have been allowed to leave, which is the more important issue. I think in terms of what Hamas has advised, again, I just have to admit my ignorance about whether they've done this at a systematic level or not.
I can say that it is documented. You can look into this, and I can find you also the direct source or just news articles that I have here, where Hamas, in response to calls to evacuate, said, "Stay where you are, be steadfast in your homes." In the face of this disgusting warfare or something like that. So Hamas did explicitly tell people to stay at home. And we also had many, many reports and videos and statements by people saying that Hamas prevents them from leaving and shoots at people who are evacuating.
Could I say one thing quicker? Okay.
I
One
would
follow-up
say,
quick, James, or no? Okay, that's fine if no.
if it's really super quick.
Yeah, it'll be really quick. The point is that the people made it to Rafah, as we all know, so they did in fact evacuate.
This one from Robert Yulunin says, at this point, this war is just revenge. Any thoughts? Anybody?
That's supposed to say that Israel is just seeking revenge.
I think so.
Well, I would say that is absurd. It's not. It is a necessary war, and revenge is not the issue. The people of Israel, in their view on this war, is generally that it is very unfortunate and very tragic, but it must be done so that something like this can never happen again in the future.
You got it. This one coming in from Robert says, this is not defending, this is full blown. We got that. This one from Isa Kabir says, to both, if you had your ideal conditions, what would you like the region to look like? What conditions would need to be met in order to have peace?
You go first.
Yeah, no, I think that the hatred is again rooted in this history of ethnic cleansing and land theft and occupation, and the occupation has to end. The ethnic cleansing and land theft has to be apologized for, and there has to be some vision of not only a short-term, specific, concrete, soon plan for a Palestinian state, but a long-term vision of allowing people to return to their indigenous land. And I think if you had that, and you had apologies, and you had mutual recriminations for war crimes, you could have a serious reduction in Palestinian hatred and Arab hatred for Israelis, which, as I say, is the real cause, not Hamas's ragtag group, but the real cause of the terrorist threat Israel faces, this hatred.
I would say that so the ideal future where peace could happen, if it was possible, would be a one-state solution under Israel, as it is today, given that within Israel, the communities are doing well, the Arabs are not being oppressed or anything, people are living together. For the Palestinian side to let go of their radical views and radical ideas and their hope to return to pre-war times and all that, or to take all of Israel, they have to let go of their radical ideas, of their hatred, of their religious ambitions, and just let Israel rule, because they're obviously doing a significantly better job at keeping the peace.
You got it. This one coming in from, do appreciate it. The Uralic tribe says, history speaks stop lying about Jewish folks originating from Khazars of Eastern Europe when the Khazars were Eurasian steppe nomads from Asia who converted to Judaism and existed until the Mongols, Kipchaks, and humans wiped them out completely.
Yeah, I've never endorsed Khazar theory. It's not true. The only thing the Jews do originate from Israel. The only thing I've said is the Ashkenazi Jews who founded the state of Israel. This before the Mizrahim came in large number later, were mostly not descended from the land, and their ancestry was from thousands of years ago. So it's just not. The point is, it's not reasonable for them to say, okay, we were here first thousands of years ago, 30% of our ancestors, whatever, 40%. And therefore we can partition the land. It isn't endorsing Khazar theory.
You got it. This one coming in. Thanks. Tom says, AP Israel are holding thousands of Palestinian children in Israeli prisons. Give Palestinians equal rights.
It really depends on how you define children. It is documented over the years. Even Amnesty International, which is often very, very critical and harsh against Israel, documented in 2005, 2009, 2012, 21, and so on, repeatedly that Hamas uses children as explosives and munition around with them at the ages of 12, 13, 15, 16, 17, and so on. Lots of them are then detained and not treated badly. When we talk of children, people make it look like they're taking a bunch of 12-year-olds or 10-year-olds and putting them in prison and keeping them there forever. That's not what's happening. That's a completely absurd view. And there is no case of Israel just randomly, taking people, detaining them and keeping them without any charges, without any justification forever. That's not what's happening. It's all public. It's all justifiable.
You got it. Thanks very much. This one coming in from Hector says, History speaks. Hamas leaders openly say they are proud to sacrifice their own citizens, and it's not their job to protect them. Hamas is doing everything in their power to maximize civilian deaths.
No, they're not doing everything in their power to maximize civilian deaths. They're not doing everything in their power, certainly, to prevent them either, right? They didn't. There are many things that they've embedded themselves in civilian infrastructure. I agree with Ridvan that they've done this, and that's a war crime and increases the risk to civilians. But they're not. They're not commandeering civilians and coercing them into staying in war zones at any systematic level, which is why we see, the vast majority made it to Rafah, right? So this is an exaggeration. They certainly can criticize Hamas for embedding itself in civilian infrastructure, but the claims made in this regard are exaggerated. And I would say that I gave many examples of in the introduction with Ridvan did not effectively refute at all, really, of white flag shootings, of bombing El Shifa Hospital, cases where obviously disproportionate or indiscriminate force was used without any kind of human shield excuse. Although Hamas does operate in civilian infrastructure like El Shifa.
You got it. Robert Yolonen says, Hamas says we will not stop until we are completely rid of them. Israel also says we will not stop until we are completely rid of them. What's the difference?
There is a huge difference. Israel does not say we will not stop until we are rid of them, as in the Palestinians, or of them as in any authority that they might have, or even their ethnic group. Whereas Hamas, on the other hand, explicitly said repeatedly over the many years two things: that they will not stop until they are rid of the Jews, and also that they will not stop until Israel is completely destroyed and annihilated, and because it is impossible for it to exist. And that position has been there all along, even when Israel made offers for a two-state solution. Plus, on October 7th, they very much presented that they have no regard for anyone, and they will willingly and lovingly execute civilians point blank, whether they are children, women, or men.
Samuel Tawhid says, can Mr. Hamas prove that Muhammad was in Jerusalem?
I mean, I'm not in the business of defending Islamic scripture. I'm not Muslim, so yeah. No, I can't.
Robert says, Tom Jump, President of USA 2024. Thanks for that. Jay Dan says, question for History Speaks. Would you agree the nature of the October 7th attack makes it hard for many people to side with Palestine? This would be a 9/11 or Pearl Harbor for Americans.
Yeah, I do. I mean, it was a massacre, right? I mean, I actually I tweeted this a while ago. I'll probably retweet it afterwards just because of this question. There was an order to massacre. It's not just that this happened, like My Lai or whatever. But yeah, of course, there still, I think, is a very broad international support for the Palestinian cause. Nevertheless, my view is that violent resistance, this kind of thing, is obviously going to alienate, especially Western opinion. Nevertheless, I think we have to also see that Israel hasn't provided any incentive for acting peacefully. The PA, since the end of the Second Intifada, has not engaged in any terrorism. They talk about this martyrs payment, but they don't actually launch terrorism. They prevent terrorism, right? They're basically police for Israel, and yet they never got any plausible, viable offer of a state, despite 20 years of nonviolence about. So they need to have this incentive to be peaceful, or they're going to be violent, and they're going to be violent in a way like this terrorism massacre because they can't defeat Israel in a conventional military sense. So it's to cause suffering to the civilian population. It's wrong, but you have to also not just moralize. You have to look at what is the motivation and what is also the basis of the hatred, which I talked about earlier.
You got it. This one coming in from Agent Black says, will Jews be allowed to live in a quote unquote Palestinian state?
I think the question is for History Speaks. I would just say,
Yes.
obviously, no, they wouldn't.
History Speaks?
Yeah, I would say it's absolutely plausible, and the foundation of it is, yeah, okay, Rizwan left, but so a couple things here. Obviously, we're not just going to jump into this. I've already said that what my vision is, which is short-term two-state solution, 67 borders, real sovereignty, and long-term with conditions met, right of return, and you'd have people living in the same state. So it's a longer-term vision. You'd have to see the populations de-radicalizing, not engage in terrorism, etc. But I believe it's quite possible. And the example I'd look to is Jordan. Jordan is majority Palestinian. You have a Christian minority that is very well integrated, is economically overrepresented. They do better than the Muslims, and is very well liked, is not subject to terrorism. So, of course, it's possible. Yeah. I mean, there's no, Christians have the same theological status as Jews in Islam, Ahl al-Kitab, people of the book. So there's no reason that this isn't possible, although it will take time for healing, and there have to be apologies and reparations made and war criminals held to account.
That's not true. Even by the Quran, that's not true. Christians and Jews do not have the same status in Islam morally. Jews are considered worse than Christians. Christians can be tolerated, and according to the Quran, are closer to Muslims, whereas Jews are the worst, the most distant, which is why they are also seen as the ones who will be eventually annihilated.
This one coming in from Sancho Panza says, I'm here for the leather straps. One of you guys selling leather straps or something. This one from the
Yeah, I
Uralic
am.
tribe says, History Speaks, you talk about paying reparations for the past. Then by that logic, as a Hungarian, I want reparations for the atrocities Muslims committed against my people for 150 years during the Ottoman Empire.
Well, there have to be, there has to be a statute of limitations on these things, and in terms of land that was stolen within living memory, I think that's a different issue than what happened with respect to the Ottomans. With respect to the Armenian genocide, for example, I think the Turks should pay reparations. Point of fact. So there has to be. It's hard to pinpoint it, but certainly things that happen within living memory, like someone whose house was literally stolen, who's alive today. Like I met a guy, actually a father of, I'll shout him out, Walid Sheikho, his father. His house was stolen in Jaffa, right? So by this absentee property law, so called. So yeah, he passed away recently, but he deserved reparations for that. That's within his lifetime, and Walid, it's his father. So I think it's hard to give a precise numerical thing, but I think things that happen within living memory definitely deserve compensation, and even a little bit outside of it, like the Armenian genocide. But when we go back thousands of years, hundreds of years, obviously in this case, the question was talking about, it becomes more dubious.
Careful how you speak about Turks.
ES1002 says, if Native Americans did a 10-7, namely October 7th, would that be okay?
I can answer. We're down country. Yeah. No, I wouldn't. I don't think it's okay, but it's explicable, right? It's morally wrong. I'm not one of these people who defends 7 October, although I have to say a bunch of my Arab friends do, right? In the region, but I don't. I think it's wrong. So no, I wouldn't say it's acceptable, but I think it's explicable, and you have to look at the source of the hatred in both cases, right? Or you have to look at the Viet Cong. The Viet Cong is an example. They committed many massacres. What are the motives for that, right?
This is the ridiculousness of the situation. It's like that so many people think that the things that happened on October 7th that were done are justifiable for some reason, or can be explained. Now, I'm not saying that Matt History Speaks here is saying it's justifiable. He's not. He's saying it's explicable. Even that, I would say, is a little bit absurd, but lots of people, including most Palestinians, think it is justifiable or it's okay, and this just shows the huge discrepancy in morality and their understanding and grasp of it. It should be under no circumstances justifiable to carry out the horrible things that were done on October 7. We have footage of it. Every time that I just have a little look at it, I feel horrible. And nobody should be subjected to that or justify that under any circumstances, no matter what injustice was done to you.
You got it. This one coming in from, do appreciate your question as well. Bungee Jumper says, what happened to the Yazidis? That's Islam. Jewish folks next.
Yeah, I mean, the Yazidis were a group that was clearly religiously motivated. They're an extreme form of Islam. The Islamic State exterminated, committed genocide against Yazidis, raped women, and horrible atrocities. I will say, polling of the Palestinians shows that a trivial, like 1%, 1.3%, 1.7% supported ISIS. So it's not as if because they support Hamas, they're sympathetic to ISIS. They weren't. So it's a different type of ideology. But of course, I mean, there's no question that this was Islamically motivated. But there's also no question that the overwhelming majority of Muslims, according to all polling, and I've acknowledged Ridvan's point about October 7th support, but if he's being intellectually honest, he'd acknowledge, and I'm not saying he hasn't, that Muslims overwhelmingly, according to every opinion poll we saw in the Islamic world, opposed ISIS. Nevertheless, ISIS was motivated by their interpretation of the religion, clearly.
That is true, but it's not limited to just ISIS. The Yazidis continuously, ISIS only took it to the very extreme.
This one coming in from, do appreciate it. Hector says, AP, I agree, Israel's war is justified. But at the very least, do you think Israel should apologize for killing Farfour? What does that mean?
Farfour, sorry, that came totally unexpected. Farfour is a TV character that was created by Hamas for their national state TV that is based on Mickey Mouse and is basically a Jew-hating terrorist character, which is horrible, but it's just funny if you look at it. Yeah. Anyway,
you got it.
That's
a joke coming in. Joshua Wooden says he does not know liberal politics or Middle Eastern history and Islamic and Jewish theology. Your prescription does not match reality. And good job, AP. This says critique of you, history speaks. If you want to defend yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say the example that Ridvan brought up. Look at these. So if the argument is Islam is so incorrigible that they can't live in peace, why do the Israeli Arabs get along with the Israeli Jews? It's part of it is just proximity to people. You don't see them as the Jew, but part of it too is that they're treated much better than the people in the occupied territories are, and they weren't ethnically cleansed from their land. So I think if the treatment were better, if the historical crimes were atoned for and apologized for, you'd have, and autonomy were given, you'd have the case of the Israeli Arabs is a counterexample that Ridvan provided right to me. So
you got it. This one coming in from, do appreciate it. Dor Daniel Sade says, my cousin was in a raid in an area of the West Bank and saw something quote unquote shocking. About 27/30 kids wanted to be Shaheed when they grow up. Please explain.
We have a lot of documentation for that also from...
What's Shaheed, by the way, just so people know?
Shaheed means martyr in Arabic. Very, very heavily emphasized term in Islam and Islamic history. There are lots of UNRWA documents from schools where they teach children the importance of being a martyr and fighting and all that. Lots of interviews that went around, lots of undercover interviews and so on. There's just so much dirt dug up. But yeah, it is average education in the Palestinian territories that it's the noblest thing to fight the occupation and to be a martyr.
Yeah, I'll just comment really quickly that the Palestinian notion of martyrdom is not a conventional Islamic notion. For example, like Aaron Bushnell is Christian. I know he's not a Muslim. He's this guy who burned himself. He's called martyr by Palestinians, right? Shireen Abu Akleh was called martyr. So this is of course, there's a religious component to Shaheed, the term, but there also is a secular component. It's much more complicated than just, it's something. The other point I'd make is if you watch the videos of all these massacred children and the parents, people are not happy their children are dying. I'm not saying that there wouldn't be some fanatical people who are, but people are not happy about this. So just look at, you can talk about Islamic doctrine, but if you look at how people have martyred, whatever they call them, children, they're not happy about it. They're very distressed. So
You got it. Also, there's a poll in chat, folks, here at Modern Day Debate. Check that out if you want to put your vote in terms of where you side on this topic. This one coming in from Joshua Wooden says, if they say the starving people are thanks to Hamas, not the IDF, as all Israeli food convoys have been stolen and Gazans murdered by Hamas. A little knowledge helps. Sassy. History Speaks, I think it's for you.
yeah, I mean, it's utter nonsense. If you look at, for example, Smotrich, the Minister of Finance, blocked the shipment of flour into Gaza. You look at also, for instance, very highly bureaucratic. CNN did an investigation of this. Highly bureaucratic limitations on whether a convoy can come in, or there's like some device that, in like some very theoretical way, could be used by terrorists. The whole convoy gets turned around. Israel's clearly bottlenecking the aid. This is part of their program to use food as a weapon of war that Human Rights Watch has accused them of. We saw at the beginning of the war, they wanted to let no food in, and we made them. I provided the evidence for that. Gallant said they wanted to let no food in. They basically want to starve these people and coerce them into either overthrowing Hamas or turning over the hostages. So yeah, they're using food as a weapon of war, and the questioner is totally erroneous when he says Israel wants to give these people food. To the extent that they've done it, it's because of our pressure.
But you do acknowledge that there have been many instances of Hamas or
Yeah,
others
they've
attacking
taken
the aid trucks and looting them or
I
abducting
mean,
them.
it would have to define many, but they've an attack, but they've certainly commandeered resources for themselves. Yeah.
You got it. This one coming in from Ricky Loco 234 says, should the USA be involved in this war and why?
Depends on how you define involved. Should they be supplying Israel with help? They definitely should, and I'm glad they do. The U.S. is a good ally, although the current administration is kind of an embarrassment in terms of how they are handling and pandering to people. Getting otherwise involved should not be necessary unless a large regional war breaks out, which I hope does not happen, and I also don't think will happen anytime soon because Israel is surrounded by cowards that like to speak a lot.
I'd like to comment on this quick.
Yep.
Yeah, no, the United States absolutely shouldn't be involved. Israel's a massive liability for the United States, not in our interest. It's betraying our values. As I said earlier, they're raising the strip. In 3 months of fighting, they destroyed 45% of housing, or made it uninhabitable. So they've killed more civilians at a per month rate, than any war other than genocidal wars in decades, as I showed earlier. So no, we shouldn't be supporting this. It's making us enemies, and Israel doesn't particularly help us. So no, we shouldn't be involved at all.
No Name says, would History Speaks submit to Sharia caliphate with all that it implies, etc.?
No, I certainly wouldn't.
You got it. And let me just be sure. We're going to wrap up, folks. Do want to say, folks, check out our guest links in the description box. And we are very grateful. The debaters are the lifeblood of the channel. So thank you very much, AP and History Speaks. It's been a true pleasure to have you guys. And folks, if you're listening via the podcast, you can find our guest links in the description box there too. We put it there as well. And if you haven't checked out the podcast, folks, check it out. It's available at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, every podcast app. You can find Modern Day Debate, where our debates are uploaded within about 24 hours of the debate being live. And want to say thanks so much for watching, folks. I'll be back in just a moment after I let our guests out. But I want to say one last time, thanks, AP and History Speaks. It's been a true pleasure to host you.
May I say very briefly before we leave that despite being very, very, very harsh and heated at certain points, I must say that I appreciate my opponent, History Speaks, Matt, how he is conducting himself, and I actually appreciate this debate and how it went. So, just want to put that out there.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity very much.
Rad. Me as well. I think that folks, the good thing is because sometimes people are uncomfortable with debate, even though, I mean, I don't know, for me, I guess I'm desensitized, but my thought is, folks, sometimes it gets passionate, although today was actually civil. I mean, people are passionate. It's not a big, even in conversations about the weather, people interrupt each other sometimes. It's just, sometimes it happens. And the idea though is, at least people are talking. I think that's a good thing. They're not shooting each other, like they're not attacking each other. And it's like at the end of Rocky 4, as he said, like they're not killing each other. And this isn't even a boxing match. Like this is just a good old debate. And not only that, but it is good that both sides are still talking to each other. I think things become worse when people become siloed off and they say, we're not even going to engage with them anymore. We're not going to talk with them anymore. We're not going to listen to their views anymore. We're not going to be, so they just completely silo off. I think that's a bad thing. I think this is a good value. So, as I said, check out our guest links. I'll be back in just a moment. So, stick around, folks. And one last thanks to our guests. It's been a true pleasure, guys. Folks, thanks so much for being here. Thrilled to have you. I want to say we are excited for a lot of things. In particular, what a great debate. Huge thanks to our guests. They are the lifeblood of the channel, as I mentioned. Folks, this was a great debate. It was respectful, it was thoughtful, it's rigorous. I do want to say we appreciate you for being here. If you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. We have many more debates coming up. This is just the beginning of Modern Day Debate story, so we appreciate all of your support as this is a neutral platform for debates. There are no videos where it's just me making the case for something. Because we said from the start, we want modern day debate to be all debates all the time. So there's no videos where, as an example, like I don't do any sort of post credits video where I say, oh man, that debater was so bad and all their arguments were so bad. And likewise, I don't have any sort of essay videos where it's like, here's James's position on Israel or Palestine. No, it is just purely debates here. This is a unique channel in that way, in that this isn't any individual's channel. This is like you could say it's the community's channel. In other words, if one side is represented in a debate, you can be guaranteed, darn sure, you're gonna have both sides. So I want to say thank you guys for your support. I want to say hello to you in the old live chat. I'm gonna get out of here pretty quick because it's 1:24. It's the middle of the workday, and I've got to get a few things done. In fact, a lot of things done. But I want to say before I do leave the stream, I want to say thanks for being here, NetTube user. I see you there in the old live chat. Thanks for being with us, as well as Tarfir. Good to see you. Oni Chan. Let me know if I'm saying it right. Glad to have you. Gaia, am I saying it right? Thanks for being with us. BH, happy that you're here. Ja Tony, happy to have you. Tom, good to have you with us. A Hamilton Script, glad that you are here. Camelot Chimp, thanks for dropping in. Malcolm Layden, thanks for being with us. Knox Play, happy to have you here. G God Hand, thanks for coming by. Dr. Muta's Man, glad that you are here. Why I'm Muted, happy to have you. Satan, I see you there in the old live chat. Libel, is it pronounced libel or libel? I think it's libel. Happy to have you here. Thanks for being a member as well. We have more. I'm sure we have other members as well. Want to say Robin Webster, I see you there. Thanks for being a member. Fake Human, good to see you again. Longtime viewer, Industrial Nerd, happy to have you with us. Clementine, glad that you are here. Zen 2011, good to see you again. Chrome, happy to have you here. Batman Inc., thanks for being a tremendous mod. Thank you for all of our mods. Thanks. Hannah Anderson, I see you there, another mod, as well as Jim Boogie, thanks for dropping in. Pony Girl, happy to have you here. MXX XD, thanks for coming by and thanks for being a mod. God the Son, Jesus Christ saves, thanks for coming by. Atheist, thanks for dropping in. Let's see here. Talmudic Tunnels Construction Inc., thanks for dropping in, as well as, am I saying this? It's like a backwards E, E Zoom 13. Am I saying it right? Thanks for dropping in. And Merely Dave, thanks for coming by. Chablet. Am I saying it right? Let me know. Thanks for coming in. Conrad, happy to have you here. Chica, is it Chica Chikami? Thanks for coming by. And T Turbine, happy to have you with us. 311D, happy to have you drop by. The Legend, thanks for coming by. I see you there in the old live chat. Tanky, good to see you in live chat. As well as Zaya Levi's. Am I saying it right? Happy to have you here. Trellion, thanks for coming by. Riker, happy to have you here. Samson Yak, glad that you're with us. Apostate Prophet, I see there in the old live chat. Thanks for saying hello. Why do we? Happy to have you here. I see you in the live chat as well. And then the legend, yep, who's got to say Hypatia Muse, thanks for coming by. Victoria, happy to have you here. Happy Frenzy, thanks for being with us. Let's see here. Gray Jedi, good to see you back. And Notorious TBG, happy to have you here. The Bottles, glad to have you with us. Marar Lay, thanks for dropping in. Knox Play, happy to have you here. And yeah, I want to say Ryan the Mod, good to see you there in the old live chat. Thanks, Ryan, for being with us. Huge thanks to Ryan and Justin, our mods, who have been filling in so that Modern Day Debate can keep running. If it wasn't for them, there would be like weeks at a time where there would be no debates. So they're integral and necessary. They are a huge help right now. It means so much that it keeps Modern Day Debate going as I'm trying to crush dissertation stuff and finally wrap up this doctorate, which is exciting. It's been a long time, you guys. It's just insane that it's been, it'll be 6 years of this doctorate. I started this YouTube channel. Technically, I started it before the doctorate, but that was before we turned it into Modern Day Debate. It used to be called Modern Day Hysteria. And then we said, hey, we're going to change this. It's going to be Modern Day Debate in particular. And that was like maybe a month into my doctorate when we like kind of really started making that turn. So yeah, exciting. Flat Swage Perspective. Good to see you there in the old live chat. I see you there. And let's see here. Let's see. Jesus Star. Or that's right. I see that that's your badge for your membership. Thanks for being a member. Thanks for dropping in. Dance Biker Dance. Thanks for coming by. Glad to have you here. DBY11. Happy to have you with us. Conrad says, howdy. Thanks so much for saying hello back, Conrad. I appreciate that. And I got to tell you, though, we're excited about the future. Even though Modern Day Debate, it's true, we've only had like, I mean, the funny thing is, thanks to Ryan and Justin, it's just been awesome that we still are, even like in our slow month. The last month's been a little bit slow. At least I've only been on like 1 or 2 debates that I've hosted in the last month. Nonetheless, we've still had like probably an average of 2 debates a week, which is still pretty good. I mean, like maybe our average overall is like 3 a week, maybe 4. I don't think it'd be 4 necessarily. I'd say 3 is probably more accurate. And we're still keeping up with like 2 or 3 a week. So that's awesome. Sometimes we only have one. That's not a big deal. Like we're still, still chugging along. And I can assure you, though, it is true. We've had a lot of the same topics. So I know a lot of people are like, man, have so many flat Earth debates. It's true. Ceteris paribus, which is fancy Latin way of saying all things equal. We found that flat Earth is, for some reason, the most popular topic. And then what I mean by all things equal, I mean that in some cases, you have some debates where it's like, oh my gosh, you got like 500,000 views. That's more because of the talent in the debate than, in other words, the popularity of the speaker than the topic. If you hold all things constant, and let's say, for example, if you have two debaters who are, average quality, let's say the same quality, and they're doing a flat earth debate versus two debaters that are doing a uh, any other topic debate, is, and imagine they have the same following and popularity, is that the flat earth debate, if you have, let's say, two new guys, two new people that are debating, it will do better compared to if it was two new people debating pretty much any other topic. Why that is, I don't know. Nonetheless, we're kind of utilitarian in the sense we're like, hey, I mean, if it does please the most people, then yeah, we will host a weekly flat earth, and once in a while even two a week, because it does seem to please the most people. Because there are some topics that, I'll give you an example. A lot of times people are like, oh, you need to change it up, have more topics. And it's like, hey, we've tried, for example, uh, global warming. And that, honestly, if we had two new people debating global warming, you'd probably get like 4,000 views, which is abysmal for a channel of this size. 182,000 subs. We should getting, at the very least, we should be getting, I would say, should probably be getting at least 8,000. That's just based on our own history. Realistically, I think we should be getting even more than that. But nonetheless, if we were to do that, I can tell you it'd probably get like 4,000 views, and that is just like, wow, we want to please the most people. We want, people to be the most happy. So the most amount of people to be the most happy. But I want to say thank you guys for all your support. Love you guys. Thanks for everything. We're excited about the future. We're going to still, nonetheless, we are going to get more topics in here. So we are working on that. So for example, I don't know if you guys saw this, Daniel Hakikachu will be debating a popular YouTuber. So I don't know if you guys know who this is. His channel's called Heated Debates, and this, it's kind of like his own, it's kind of like the Crucible, where it's like kind of like the guys, he has position videos, it sounds like, and then he also has debates. And so it's kind of like a hybrid where they'll host, more debates than, let's say, the average channel. Although I'd say there are a lot of, it's kind of like a lot of channels are like that, where it's like, for example, like Destiny's content. There are a lot of debates. It's, almost always Destiny. But then there are also, him playing video games, talking about whatever interesting topic. So, um, this guy, like I said, called Heated Debates. If you look at it, the topic is, this is in 40 days. So I know it's like, oh, dang, it's like, James, don't make me wait that long. I know. But we've got a lot of debates. We've got like two or three debates with Daniel before that, in the next month. So that's why Daniel was like, hey, let's push it out. Is that this will be in about 40 days. Heated debates versus Muslim skeptic. This is going to be on Hinduism versus Islam's treatment of women. In other words, which treats women with most respect or most properly, whatever you want to say. That will be controversial. I think that's going to be a huge debate. So we are excited to have something new. Flatwade's perspective says, James, are you a natty? Yes, I've never taken steroids. I'm flattered, actually. I'm never insulted when people ask. Because I've had people ask since I was like a teenager, because I've always loved lifting weights. I just enjoy it intrinsically. I just love going to the gym. And um, yeah, if anything, I'm just flattered because I'm like, wow, like flattered that you think that, that it like apparently look, so that's kind. But no, actually, I've never, the most unnatural thing I've used, right here, my shoulder is sore. Oh, is creatine. And creatine, though, is like nothing related to your hormones or your testosterone. It's basically, it just helps your muscles have more energy available. And that's it. So it's a very basic and cheap supplement too. Creatine monohydrate, is dirt cheap. It's like one of the most effective supplements for strength and building strength. So I highly, check with your doctor. You always want to have plenty of water if you have creatine. So yeah, I mean, and that's something that, yeah, bodybuilders would be like, why are you even bringing that up, James? Like, that's not what people mean when they mean natty. I think normal people are like, oh, that's not natural. I'm like, yeah, I mean, well, technically, you actually could, just through food, you could get you could get 5 grams of creatine a day. It's just that it's a lot harder, so you'd have to have a lot more red meat, for example. But you can just get it in a white powder. So just long as you have plenty of water with it, your kidneys are fine. And I would say, like I said, check with your doctor first. But and just make sure your kidneys are fine. Make sure you're drinking plenty of water if you do try it. But yeah, so I do love to lift though. It's fun. It's just I'm gonna do it today. I'm gonna do it this afternoon, pretty shortly here. I just enjoy it. It's a stress reliever. It just makes me feel good. Um, it's yeah, it helps me manage stress. I've just got a lot on my plate. I'm always kind of stressed and tired and pushed, and at least this last 6 years with the PhD and stuff. So I'm grateful that I get to lift. It's fun. And yeah, that's the trick. Do something if you want to exercise, do something you enjoy, and that way, it's fun and you want to do it. And motivation is an issue. So whatever that might be for you, maybe like even just walking is so good for you. Uh, Way better than not doing anything. So Tony Permigiani, am I saying it right? Happy to have you here in the live chat. Memory Foam, I like your name. It's a cool username. I love Memory Foam. I've been so grateful to have memory foam. It's just it feels great having like a topper on your mattress of memory foam. Woody Harrelson, glad to have you here. Trinity Matrix, good to have you. Dr. Mew, you got to see Michael Pun, glad to have you. Woody Harrelson, thanks for dropping in. Happy to have you here. But yeah, want to say thanks for all your kind words. Jim Boogie says now for something more valuable, don't forget to invest in Tesla and PLTR. Interesting. Juicy. So you're not a bot, Jim Boogie. You can't be, because I know I saw other chats from you that were not pushing investments. Yeah, so you're real. You're just excited about these investments. So good for you. But yeah, I want to say thanks for all your support. Love you guys. And yeah, it's always fun. I hate leaving. Like I'm in such a good mood right now that I'm like, I got to go to the bank and I got to do all this other stuff. So, but thanks guys for all your support. Love you. Thanks for everything. I'm excited about the future. We are planning on some big stuff. And spoiler alert, we are planning on having a debate con later this year. Debate Con 5. It'll be Debate Con 5, our fifth conference. It's going to be big. We're excited to like really kind of keep stretching and trying to do new things, get new speakers. So that's going to probably be in October, late October, probably, maybe mid. And I'm excited for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. Uh, we're pumped about the future. So we're going to try all sorts of new things. Appreciate all your support and love you guys. Keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable. And we will see you at the next debate. Thanks, everybody.